Chapter 76, Godfather and Godson, I. Makusa Headquarters, Department of Magical Transportation, August 7, 1994. Bloody hell! Sirius Black exclaimed as it seemed like he fell from the sky and landed on the marble floor along with another body. I hate port keys. Nymphadora pouted as she slowly pushed herself off the floor. She was already expecting to land flat on her face, so she wasn't surprised like Sirius was. That was much rougher than I was expecting, Sirius grumbled unhappily as he slowly stood up and started to dust off his robes with his hands. He had prematurely aged beyond that of a man in his 30s thanks to his stint in Azkaban. When the Aurors pulled him out of Azkaban, he had a gaunt and sunken face with waxy skin and yellow teeth. His hair was also long and matted, but now all those signs of his stint in Azkaban were almost gone. He had regained his lustrous black hair along with most of his aristocratic visage. Tell me about it. I knew I was going to land on my face long ago, Tonks declared with a huff. I hope you aren't proud about that, Sirius pointed out warily, but before Tonks could give him a snarky retort, a blonde-haired, middle-aged woman cleared her throat as she stepped forward. Welcome to Makusa. My name is Stacy Dumont, may I know your names? The woman asked politely with a parchment in her hands. Sirius smiled cheekily and extended his hand toward the woman. Stacy didn't think much of it and simply extended her hand toward Sirius, expecting him to shake her hand, but instead, he simply grabbed her hand and leaned down to place a kiss on the back of her hand. Stacy placed her other hand on her cheek and giggled. Good morning, milady. Sirius Black at your service. Sirius Black respectfully bowed his head, making Stacy giggle again. Oh my! Aren't you a charmer? Stacy said with a bit of a flush on her face. Meanwhile, Tonks simply stared at the duo with a dumb look on her face. She knew that Sirius was a man-whore, but watching him in action was an eye-opening experience for her. She couldn't believe how easily Sirius was laying down the moves. Thank you, milady, Sirius said with a righteous look as he placed his hand over his chest. I would have loved to stay and chat with such a beautiful lady, but unfortunately, I already have a pre-arranged appointment, Sirius said with a saddened look on his face. My. Such a flatterer, the woman commented before she stared at the parchment in her hands. Let me see. Sirius Black. The woman muttered absent-mindedly as her gaze trailed down the parchment. Ah! Here it is! The woman exclaimed cheerfully as she turned over the parchment toward Sirius. The parchment started to float in the air and stopped right in front of Sirius. Stacy pulled out a self-refilling quill and handed it over to Sirius. Here, sign this, Stacy said as she traced the empty spot where he needed to sign. Sirius nodded his head and signed the document. The document flashed dimly, signifying the fact that the signature was legit. This is the reason why quills and parchments are still used in official matters. Muggle papers can't handle enchantments and break easily, while magical signatures can only be performed with a quill, and a magical signature performed with a quill cannot be reforged. Stacy beamed at him before she grabbed the parchment and turned toward Tonks with an expectant look on her face. Nymphadora Tonks. Tonks grounded out unhappily, making Stacy nod her head as her gaze returned to the parchment. Ah! Here it is. You are British Auror, Stacy called out as her gaze returned to Tonks, waiting for an explanation. I am not here in any form of official capacity. I am simply accompanying my uncle, Tonks explained calmly, and the woman nodded her head in understanding. All right. Stacy said and turned over the parchment toward Tonks before handing her the quill. Sign here, Stacy pointed, and Tonks nodded her head before signing the document. Once again, the document flashed dimly, signifying the fact that the signature was legit. Awesome. We are done here. There is a counter outside, please collect your temporary wand permits from there, Stacy explained cheerfully as she gestured toward the door. Thank you, milady, but I was wondering if you are free in the evening. Sirius asked, making Stacy smile at him. I am sorry, Mr. Black, but I already have a boyfriend, Stacy said in an almost cheerful tone. Sirius felt like he had sucked a lemon, but he decided to put a smile on his face and accept his defeat like a man. Must be a lucky man, Sirius mused with a smile as he started to walk toward the door, followed by Tonks, who was barely holding herself back from laughing at Sirius. Welcome to Makusa and have a nice stay. Stacy exclaimed from behind just before the two of them walked out of the room. Sirius turned back and gave her a wave before closing the door. Ouch! That must have hurt. Tonks blurted out with a mocking look on her face just after Sirius closed the door. Sirius huffed. She doesn't know what she is missing. Sirius sniffed haughtily. Well, Not everyone can have this fine piece of specimen, Sirius said, gesturing to himself, making Tonks give him a disgusted look. In your dreams? Tonks exclaimed in outrage just before she tripped and planted her face on the floor. My! Even the world doesn't seem to agree with you and seems to be quite displeased with your comment too. Sirius laughed at her blunder before giving her hand. Haha, very funny. Tonks growled in anger as she stood up on her own. After the duo made their way straight to the counter to get their temporary wand permits. The man at the counter also asked them to sign a document before he finally handed them their temporary wand permits. The last time Tonks came to this country, she didn't have to do any of this as she didn't use any legal channels to enter the country, but this time she came along with Sirius, who could easily afford the legal channels of Port Kea without any issues. As the two of them started to make their way out of the makusa headquarters, Tonks started to wonder if she should tell Sirius everything about the time she met Harry Potter. Alastor had asked her not to tell anything, and while Tonks may not know how to be graceful, she did know how to keep a secret or two. Though at the same time, Sirius wasn't just anyone. He was Harry's godfather, but after thinking for a couple of minutes, Tonks decided to keep everything to herself. She didn't know how close Sirius and Albus Dumbledore were, but she had seen Sirius receive a letter from the man, which meant that the two of them were in contact. If she told Sirius anything, then there was a good chance that Sirius might end up revealing everything to Albus, or he might end up confronting Albus. Either way, the jig would be up and Albus freaking Dumbledore would know what they were up to. He might change his plans or he might come after them. She knew not, and that is why she decided to take a leaf from Mad Eye's book and play it safe. She only hoped that Harry would keep his mouth shut. They did tell him that it was a clandestine meeting. The two of them finally walked out of the Woolworth building, and Tonks tripped at least 3 more times during their short walk. The smell of junk food wafted toward them as soon as they walked up to the street. Come on, Sirius. Let's go grab something before we make our way to Gringotts. Tonks exclaimed cheerfully as she started to drag Sirius toward the fast stalls before he could protest. Tonks, I am on a strict diet. I can't eat that, Sirius sputtered in protest when he saw the food Tonks was planning to buy. Well, too bad for you, I guess. Tonks shrugged her shoulders in mock disappointment as she decided to stop dragging Sirius. She already knew about his strict diet, and that is why she dragged him here. She wanted to torture him for making fun of her clumsiness. Come on, Tonks. Sirius whined. You aren't planning to make me watch you eat delicious food, are you? Sirius asked hesitantly when he noticed that Tonks was still planning to buy food. Of course I am. Watch me. Tonks declared as she rubbed the bottom of her finger haughtily, making Sirius scowl at her. How can you do this to me? Sirius asked with a hurt look on his face. Then you shouldn't have made fun of me, Tonks reminded him as she bought a hot dog and took a bite of it while deliberately giving Sirius a show. The man whimpered before glaring at Tonks. I will tell Andy that you are bullying me. Sirius exclaimed as the idea finally clicked inside his mind. Go on. I will tell her how you were acting like a dog in heat, Tonks retorted, looking pleased with herself for coming up with that. You remember she said that she would neuter you if you try to act like a man whore, don't you? Tonks asked in an amused tone, making Sirius whimper again. Now be a good boy and try not to drool, Tonks cackled as she started to head toward the bus stop with a small bag of fast food in her hands. Wait for me, you devil! Sirius exclaimed in outrage as he caught up to her. Meanwhile, Tonks couldn't stop herself from cackling in mad glee at his plight. Chapter 77, Mother and Son, I. Harry's apartment, August 7, 1994. You look great, Hadrian Lily praised proudly as Harry looked at his reflection in the mirror. Though I don't want you attracting any hussies, Lily added bitterly, making Harry smile warily. I don't think I look that good, Harry pointed out in an unsure tone. He truly didn't believe that witches would start throwing themselves at him after taking a single look at him. My baby boy. You don't know how good you look. If I had a body, then I would have kept you all for myself, Lily declared passionately, making Harry flush a bit. His heart fluttered at her words, making the blush on his face more prominent. What are you saying, Mom? Harry sputtered out in embarrassment, making Lily giggle in amusement. Now. You don't need to act coy, Hadrian. I already know what you feel about me, Lily trailed off slyly, and Harry's face was red like a tomato after hearing her words. No need to feel bad, Hadrian. You have no idea how happy that makes me, Lily cooed, making his face even redder, and she was worried that steam might start coming out of his ears if she continued. I am sorry, Mom, Harry muttered in a low tone after he finally got a grip on his emotions, which were going haywire thanks to his raging hormones. Lily immediately felt alarmed. Maybe she pushed him too hard. She quickly realized that she needed to fix this as soon as possible. No, Hadrian. You don't need to apologize. Whatever happened, happened, Lily explained firmly. If I am being honest, I also feel the same about you, Lily muttered in a low tone, making Harry's eyes go wide like saucers. Harry licked his lips nervously. He already knew that his mom didn't mind his feelings. In fact, she was completely alright with them, but this is the first time she outright admitted that she also felt the same about him. He didn't know how to feel, but his pants started to feel tight as his member started to harden at the thought. Ignoring his hardness for the time being, Harry decided to confirm if he heard her correctly or not. What did you say? Harry asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His throat felt almost dry, thanks to his nervousness. I feel the same about you. I am also attracted to you, Lily admitted confidently, but there was a hint of nervousness in her voice. This is not how she planned to do this. She wanted to impose the idea more deeply into his mind before doing this, but she had to improvise or she might lose everything. She couldn't have that. Hadrian, say something, Lily urged, sounding worried. Harry gulped loudly. His manhood throbbed painfully at the idea, but he simply adjusted his pants to make himself more comfortable. I don't know what to say, Mom, Harry admitted hesitantly. To be honest, he didn't know how to put his feelings into words. I am happy. I am really happy, but to be honest, I don't know how to express my feelings in words, Harry said honestly. Lily barely held herself back from whooping in joy. She decided that she would do that when her Hadrian was asleep. Don't worry. I understand, Hadrian. I also felt like that when I realized what you feel about me the first time, Lily comforted him softly. Oh, Harry muttered intelligently. He didn't know what else to say. His mind was still reeling at the implications. What about the Oth? Harry wanted to ask what about the others as he didn't know what the others might think about their relationship, but before he could finish speaking, Lily cut him off. He didn't even consider the fact that his mom didn't even have a body yet, as it was only a matter of time. Even if his mom didn't feel the same about him, he would have still built her a body. He already had all the determination he needed even without his mom's confession, he simply needed the necessary knowledge and means to create her a body. What about them? Lily asked with a growl. She won't allow anyone to come between her and Hadrian. She finally confessed, and she knew that Hadrian was practically ready to start the relationship, so there was no way she would allow some insignificant strangers to interfere in their blooming relationship. They can take their valued opinions and shove them up their collective arses, Lily growled in anger as she clenched her fists tightly. All right, Harry agreed as he nodded his head in agreement. So, what now? Harry asked in an unsure tone. He knew all about dates and all that, but this wasn't a typical relationship, so Harry didn't know what to do next. We will talk about this later or you will be late for the meeting, Lily pointed out as she saw the clock through Harry's eyes. She also wanted to take the first step in their relationship, but even she had no idea what to do next. All of her previous plans were obsolete and she needed some time to form new plans. Additionally, Hadrian was also excited to meet his godfather. All right. Then we will talk after we return, Harry confirmed. Harry looked down at his pants and he was still sporting a raging boner. Lily also saw the sight and her core twitched in anticipation, but she decided not to make any comments right now. Once again, he adjusted his pants a bit and started to exercise a clemency to stop thinking about the conversation he just had, but it was kind of impossible. After a few minutes of struggle, he was finally able to get it down and sighed in relief. He glanced at the clock and noticed that it was almost time. He closed his eyes and disapparated with a soft pop. Moments later, he arrived inside one of the dark alleys near the Gringotts with a soft pop. During last week, he also learned how to apparate and create port keys from Jacqueline, and it wasn't that hard. Jacqueline only had to apparate once in front of him and he knew how to apparate while she didn't even need to show him how to create port keys. She only explained the process to him once and he knew how to create port keys. Jacqueline had warned him against getting caught while doing either, as he could have to pay hefty fines if he was caught by the Aurors. Harry smoothed his robes and walked out of the alley. He decided to go with robes as he wanted to make a good impression. According to his mom, Sirius never cared about traditions and all that shit, but the man still preferred robes over muggle clothes for meetings, so he decided to go in robes, and robes couldn't go wrong in this case. After walking for a bit, Harry arrived at the Gringotts and walked up to a teller. I am Harry Potter and I have an appointment with Sirius Black, Harry called out haughtily with his nose pointed up in the air. If the goblins were going to look down at him, then he was going to act arrogantly too. Previously, he couldn't understand why the wizarding kind allowed the goblins to have a monopoly over all the gold when the goblins supposedly lost all the last rebellions, but after gaining his new powers he finally started connecting the dots. He quickly theorized that the goblins didn't lose any of the rebellions, but both parties always came to an agreement each time. While the wizards probably foolishly decided to boast that they won the rebellions to stroke their bloated egos, the goblins smartly decided to manage the wizarding gold. The wizards probably thought that they had the upper hand as the goblins were willing to manage their gold for them, and they foolishly handed over all of their gold to the goblins. Harry told his mom about his theory and his mom admitted that his theory was sound. The goblin looked down at Harry from his high table and bared his sharp and pointed teeth. Then without saying anything, the goblin tapped the bell on his desk and a differently dressed goblin appeared from the other side of the hall. The goblin growled something in gobbledygook and Harry didn't understand anything besides the number 7. Come wizard, follow me. The goblin who came out from the other side of the hall urged Harry to follow him. He made his way toward the goblin and started to follow him. What did he tell you? Harry asked curiously. He already knew the basic gist of it, but he simply wanted to know how correct he was. He wasn't worried about the fact that they might do something untoward to him and the goblins would never dare to kidnap a wizard in broad daylight and Harry was someone who could make Quidditch celebrities look like beggars. Yes, they did have a lot of power inside Gringotts but that was all. They were only allowed to attack thieves or someone who was impersonating others. The goblin huffed. He told me to lead you to take you to meeting room 7. The goblin answered without turning back and Harry nodded his head in satisfaction. That was basically what he thought. We are here. The goblin stopped walking and pointed at a door, which had a golden number 7 inscribed on it. By the way, the other party is already here and waiting inside, the goblin said and walked away without looking back. Harry was already expecting them to be already here, so he sniffed and turned toward the door, and knocked on it. He could already sense 2 people inside the room, one male and one female. A masculine voice told him to enter from the inside and Harry pushed the door open. As soon as the door was opened, he saw a man, who was probably in his 30s staring toward him with a nervous look on his face. Harry realized that the man was probably pacing inside the room. Sirius Orion Black. 12 Black Walnut, Dragon Heartstring Core. The words appeared on top of the man's head and his core lit up with a dim glow. The man had a solid-state core. Well, nothing out of expectations as the man used to be a hit wizard, and according to his mom, he was quite strong. Sometime during the last week, Harry butchered the spell he copied from Violetta Beauvais and decided to study wand lore as a wand could tell a lot about their wizard or witch. Harry's eyes turned toward the other figure in the room and he barely held himself back from making a face when he read the words on top of the other figure's head. Nymphadora Vulpecula Tonks. 13 1/2 Cedar, Dragon Heartstring Core. Harry realized that either Tonks' mom hated the girl and gave her an abomination of a name or Tonks' mom suffered a lot during the labor and decided with an abomination to name her daughter to take revenge. Harry genuinely felt bad for her. Chapter 78, Godfather and Godson, 2. Meeting Room 7, Gringotts. Sirius Black simply gaped at the boy standing at the door with a lost look on his face. He had been pacing in the room impatiently, waiting for Harry's arrival, but now that he didn't know what to say. He had seen Harry's pictures in the books and he had to admit, Harry looked nothing like in those pictures. The similarities between Harry and James were uncanny, but the differences were also prominent. The most prominent differences were his eyes and the lack of his glasses. James' eyes were brown, but Harry's eyes were vibrant green, even more vibrant than Lily's. It almost felt like his eyes were glowing, but his eyes were simply so vibrant that they looked like they were glowing. Thanks to the lack of glasses, his eyes were standing out even more. I am Sirius. I am your godfather. Sirius choked out as he was barely holding himself back from breaking down. Now that Harry was standing right in front of him, all of his guilt was coming back at him. He had talked with Albus and he had told him all about the abuse. Sirius blamed himself for ruining Harry's childhood. When he saw the bodies of James and Lily lying down on the floor, completely lifeless, he was blinded by revenge, but that was not an excuse as Harry was also there, in his crib. He prioritized vengeance before his godson and thanks to the choice he made that night, his godson lost his childhood and he had to spend almost a decade and a half in the hellhole, otherwise known as Azkaban. Sirius Harry greeted the man with a nod and then he turned toward Tonks, who was staring at him while subtly shaking her head. He immediately understood that Tonks was probably trying to convey something, but it took him a moment to understand what she was trying to convey. Apparently, she was trying to remind him that their meeting was to be kept a secret. "And who might you be?" Harry asked, playing along with her, making Tonks slump down in relief. Harry had no idea if Sirius was still one of Dumbledore's yes-men, so it was a good thing that even Tonks wanted to keep their meeting a secret. "I am Tonks." Tonks introduced herself with a bright smile on her face as she pointed a finger at herself. Harry gave her a weird look after hearing her words. "You probably already know this, but I am Harry Potter." Harry introduced himself politely, before turning back toward Sirius, who was staring at him like a deer caught in headlights. Why don't we sit down and talk?" Harry suggested as he gestured toward the meeting table. Sirius blinked as he finally realized that he had been staring at Harry. He coughed in his hands to regain some decorum. Yes. Yes. You are right." Sirius immediately agreed and coughed again when he realized that he was acting like a kid whereas Harry was acting like he was the adult between the two of them. "Sirius, you need to calm down. He is not going to eat you," Tonks pointed out from the side, making Sirius take a deep breath to calm himself before he finally sat down. Harry also sat down on the other side of the table and decided to wait for Sirius to start speaking. Unknowingly, Sirius was also hoping for Harry to start speaking, so the two of them simply kept staring at each other for the next few moments, until Tonks finally decided to interrupt again. "Well, this is bloody awkward." Tonks mumbled as she kept switching her gaze between them. After hearing her words, Sirius was the one who decided to break the ice. "I am sorry. I know, I messed up. Instead of making you my priority, I decided to chase after Pettigrew and you paid the price for my actions. I don't have any excuses for what I did, but I still want you to know that I am sorry for whatever it's worth." Sirius stood up and apologized, looking really miserable, and Harry decided not to interrupt him. Sirius needed to get this off his chest or it might keep eating at him from the inside. When he was finally done, Harry started to speak. "It's all right. It wasn't your fault. It was the fault of the people who had wrongfully imprisoned you." Harry tried to comfort the man with his words. "I won't say that I wasn't angry at you, but I understand, shit happens." Harry shrugged. "My father was like your brother in all but blood and my mother was also one of your best friends. I can understand why you decided to chase after Pettigrew." Harry nodded his head in understanding. "But, all of that is in the past. Neither of us would gain anything if we keep wallowing about what happened. So, why don't we move on?" Harry asked, taking the lead in the conversation. "Wow! I can't believe you are only 14. Tonks trailed off with an odd look on her face before all of a sudden, a frown crossed across her face. "You are 14, right?" Tonks asked in an unsure tone, wanting to confirm if was already 14 or not. After getting a nod from Harry, Tonks whipped her head toward Sirius with an exasperated look on her face. "See? Even a 14-year-old gets it," Tonks explained with a huff as she threw her arms up in the air in exasperation. "This is what my mum was trying to get into that thick head of yours." Tonks continued to scream at Sirius, who was trying to look away from her with a sheepish look on her face. "You are smart just like your mother," Sirius said when Tonks finally stopped scolding him. "Your mature attitude reminds me quite a bit of her. She would be proud that you didn't turn out like your father." Sirius trailed off with a longing look on his face and sniffed as he wiped the corner of his eyes. "Not that I am saying it a bad thing," Sirius quickly added when he realized that Harry might feel bad since he said that Harry is nothing like his father. "I know she is proud," Harry admitted mysteriously, but both Sirius and Tonks didn't seem to think much about his words. "By the way, thank you for the gift. I love it," Harry said with a bright smile on his face. "Haha! I told you he would love it," Sirius exclaimed as he threw Tonks a smug look, who gave him an annoyed look. "There is no way James' son wouldn't love flying or Quidditch," Sirius exclaimed and clapped his hands. He was acting like he had won the lottery. "I don't like Quidditch. Why would I like that silly game?" Harry asked unhappily, making Sirius stare at Harry in complete horror, and Tonks burst out laughing while pointing a finger at Sirius' horrified face. "I can't believe this!" Sirius gasped in horror as he reeled back in his seat. "This must be a dream. Yeah. This must be a DR. Ow!" Sirius started to mumble with a horrified look on his face, but he exclaimed and started to rub his arm when Tonks hit him with a stinging hex. "You didn't have to hex me literally," Sirius explained, looking offended. "Well, at least, now you know that you aren't dreaming or anything, Harry pointed out with an amused look on his face. That's right, kiddo. Tonks exclaimed cheerfully as she put away her wand. Ah. Well, I was hoping to invite you to the World Cup finals, but if you don't like Quidditch then you don't need to come, Sirius sighed in disappointment. Though I hope we are still going. It has been quite some time since I went camping and all that, Tonks mumbled, looking a bit disappointed too. Harry perked up at the word camping, and then there was the fact that Harry wanted to visit magical Britain without raising any flags. He realized that he wouldn't get any better chance than this. Additionally, he also wanted to check out the Black Library. I don't mind. I may not like Quidditch, but I would like to get to know you, and I have never been camping, Harry said, looking a bit excited. Really? Sirius perked up in excitement after hearing his words. Well, then. I guess I can't disappoint you. Sirius cheered in excitement. He was happy that Harry wanted to get to know him. Don't worry. It will be your best camping experience. Sirius beamed at Harry, looking like Christmas had come early. Thanks for the invitation, Harry thanked the man with a smile on his face. Sirius clearly knew about his childhood, which meant he either heard it from Tonks or Dumbledore. Tonks clearly didn't tell him, as she reminded him to keep their last meeting a secret, which meant that he could also exempt Moody from the list, leaving only Dumbledore. Harry wanted to know how much Sirius trusted the bearded fool and if Sirius could be brought to his side. Having Sirius on his side would do him a lot of good, as he was bound to get involved in the war and he wasn't planning to fight a bloodless war. The only good Death Eater is a dead Death Eater. Think nothing of it. It is my duty as your godfather. Sirius waved off his hands dismissively. So, Harry, tell me about the school. Sirius finally decided to change the topic as he internally thanked Andy for helping him prepare topics for the conversation. Chapter 79, Godfather and Godson, 3. Meeting Room 7. Tonks, can you believe this? My godson already has a harem. Sirius exclaimed with a joyful look on his face as he wiped fake tears from the corner of his eyes. You are already following in my and in your father's footsteps. I am so proud of you. Sirius sniffed comically and Harry simply gave him a bland look. Please, Sirius. Not everyone thinks with the other head like you, Tonks groaned, looking irritated. For your information, they are only my best friends and I am not looking for a relationship right now, Harry stated firmly, completely ignoring the fact that only a couple of hours ago, he was planning to start a relationship with his own mother. Sirius gasped in horror at his words. You can't be serious. Sirius blurted out, looking completely horrified. Of course not, you are Sirius and I am Harry, Harry said innocently, making Sirius stare at Harry with a completely bewildered look on his face. To be honest, he wasn't expecting this from Harry, especially when Harry was not a pranker. Tonks guffawed loudly at his expense. Wahahaha. How does that feel, old man? Tonks asked in between her laughs. She grabbed her stomach as her stomach started to hurt, thanks to laughing so much. Oh. This is hilarious. I can't wait to tell my mum about this, Tonks wheezed out as she finally started to calm down. I don't know how to feel, but I am proud. Sirius started with an unsure look, but the unsure look quickly transformed into a prideful look. I knew you had potential. Sirius beamed at Harry. I couldn't pass up such a good chance, Harry stated with a shrug. By the way, when is the Quidditch World Cup? Harry asked curiously. It's on August 18th. Oh, I almost forgot. Sirius exclaimed as he remembered something and started to rummage through his pockets. After checking a couple of his pockets, he pulled out a few colorful glowing parchments and placed them on the table. I bought some tickets so that you can also invite your friends too, Sirius said as he pushed the tickets toward Harry. You didn't have to do this. Harry said, looking a bit concerned, only for Sirius to wave his hands dismissively. No need to worry, the minister gave me 6 VIP tickets to get into my good graces and I bought 6 more on my own, Sirius explained dismissively, and Harry couldn't help but raise his eyebrows at Sirius at his remark. Do you always spend gold this casually? Harry asked as he simply couldn't fathom why Sirius would spend so much gold brazenly. That's basically pocket change for him. You have no idea how rich he truly is, Tonks pointed out lazily. My mum once told me that the Blacks could probably live leisurely for generations with the amount of gold they have in their vaults, Tonks explained, making Sirius give Harry a sheepish look. Well, *k them. I am the only surviving Black and I will spend it as I like. Sirius proclaimed proudly. Though we aren't as rich as we used to be before the war and my psychotic family was funding you-know-who and his Death Eaters. Sirius scowled unhappily. I see. Harry muttered as he grabbed the tickets from the table. Apparently, Sirius had decided to hand over 6 tickets to him. I don't even know what to do with 6 tickets, Harry mumbled as he stared at the tickets with a complicated look on his face as he realized that he was holding a small fortune in his hands. Well, I am not taking them back, Sirius declared with a huff. By the way, inform me how many of you will be coming over before the 10th, as I will have to arrange the port KF for you guys. You will arrive in Britain on the 15th and then we'll go camping on the 16th. Sirius quickly laid down the plan. We will be camping from the 16th when the game is on the 18th. Harry asked in an incredulous tone, and Sirius couldn't help but give him a bland look. It's criminal to think how unaware you are, Sirius mumbled under his breath as he shook his head. It's the Quidditch World Cup. There is going to be more than one match and only the finals are going to be on the 18th. There will be more matches before that, Sirius explained drily, and now that Sirius explained it, he felt really stupid for thinking that there was going to be only one match. Harry kicked himself internally for failing to deduce something so simple even with his newfound intelligence. He never paid much attention to Quidditch, but that wasn't an excuse. Right now, he was embarrassed by his own lack of knowledge. Well, I don't have any problems with the plan, Harry said while nodding his head. Great. Then I will be waiting for your letter by the 10th. Sirius cheerfully clapped his hands. Brilliant. So, Harry, you have been in this country for quite some time, haven't you? Tonks asked slyly, and Harry gave her a hesitant nod as he had no idea where she was going with the question. So, you must know some good places to have some really good food, right? Tonks asked with a cheeky grin. Foo *k. She is a glutton even though she doesn't look like one, Harry cursed inside his mind. She seems to be eating quite a lot for that figure, Lily agreed with Harry. It might have something to do with her metamorphomagus physiology. Maybe her body can process food much faster than the others, Harry concluded after a bit of thinking. He knew that he was simply making an educated guess, but he was almost sure that his theory was right. Wait! Sirius exclaimed as he raised his hands in the air. There is something else we will need to discuss before we leave, Sirius declared, and Tonks slumped down on the table with a pout on her face. Ah, man! I am getting hungry, Tonks whined petulantly as she started to sulk. How dare you! Sirius exclaimed with a mock outraged look on his face. Only a couple of hours ago, you ate so much on your own and you are already hungry. Sirius accused while pointing his finger at her, only for Tonks to shrug dismissively. So? I am hungry again, Tonks stated with a matter-of-factly look on her face, leaving Sirius speechless with her words. Harry was amused by their byplay, but he decided to ask what Sirius wanted to talk about. So, he fake coughed in his hands to get their attention. You said you have something else to discuss, Harry reminded him, and Sirius nodded his head as he lost any traces of mirth from his face. Harry realized that it must be something serious, no pun intended. As I said, I am the only surviving black. So, if I kick the bucket all of a sudden, then the whole black fortune will go to Draco, Narcissa's son, Sirius started to explain grimly, raising several questions inside Harry's mind, like who the Foo-K was Narcissa and then who the Foo-K was Draco, and ultimately, why the Foo*K should he care? He knew that he wasn't a black, so there was no way for him to inherit the fortune. You see, he is the only male child who could inherit the title of Lord Black and the fortune of the Black family, but I would burn everything to the ground before allowing that. Sirius ground his teeth in anger. Wait! First of all, who are you even talking about? Harry asked with a look of confusion. He realized that this Narcissa was probably a black, but she married into another family and her son will be eligible to inherit everything after Sirius' death through Narcissa, but he wanted to make sure. Oh, right. Sirius clicked his tongue. She is my cousin and one of the 3 infamous black sisters. Bellatrix Lestrange née Black, she is a crazy bitch and certifiably insane. She is one of you-know-who's fanatics, and probably his most devout follower. She did pretty horrible things during the war and she is currently rotting in Azkaban. Good riddance. She is the eldest of the Black sisters and she is also my cousin, Sirius explained bitterly. Then Andromeda Tonks née Black, the middle sister. She is Tonks' mum, Sirius explained and pointed at Tonks, who waved her hand at Harry. She eloped with a Muggleborn and she was disowned due to that. I have already started the process to bring her back into the family and it will happen in maybe a day or 2. She is the middle sister of the three, Sirius explained with a fond smile on his face before once again losing the smile altogether. And finally, Narcissa Malfoy née Black, the youngest sister and probably the most spoiled one. She married Lucius Malfoy, one of you-know-who's fanatics, but he escaped charges by claiming that he was held under the Imperious curse. Sirius growled angrily as he slammed his fist on the table. If I die right now, their son, Draco Malfoy will receive everything, but I want you to inherit everything if something happens to me. Sirius smiled winningly. Really? Why not Tonks? Harry asked curiously. He was glad that Sirius wanted to leave everything to him after his death, but he still had some questions. Well, my ancestors used to be sexist pigs, so only a male could inherit the title of Lord Black, Sirius answered dismissively. I don't have black blood in my veins, Harry pointed out. It won't be a problem. There is a small ritual we will need to perform and you will be eligible enough to inherit the title, but there is a small problem with that. Technically, I will be adopting you as my son, Sirius explained, looking really uncomfortable. Chapter 80, Mother and Son, 2. Hadrian, you must accept this offer. The Black family name and all that fortune will go a long way. Lily started firmly, but there was an authoritative tone in her voice. Yes, he will be taking the place of your father, but I don't believe that to be a huge deal, Lily added strongly. Harry could already see the pros of accepting the offer, but he felt like there were some cons too. For example, Sirius was going to take the place of his father as he was going to adopt him into the family, so he wanted to make sure that his mom wasn't pushing him for this just for his sake. Yes, he was getting a hard-on thinking about his own mom, but that was beside the point. Are you sure? Harry asked with a hint of concern in his voice. Yes, why wouldn't I be sure? Lily asked in a flabbergasted tone. Well, you know he is going to take the place of my... Harry started to explain when he realized that she was genuinely confused, but before he could finish, Lily cut him off. So what? He isn't here. He will always have a place in my heart, but you are a lot more important to me than he ever was, and if we could speak with him right now, I am sure that he would have agreed to, Lily explained firmly. I see. You knew him better, so you know what he would have done better than me. Harry accepted Lily's words without much fuss, knowing that she would never deceive him. According to him, it would have been a great prank. The Malfoys would be waiting to get their hands into the Black Fortune, but you will take everything from under their noses. Lily chuckled in amusement. By the way, don't accept the offer right away or don't act too eager. Tell him that you need some time to think, Lily said, her tone once again serious. I wasn't planning to accept the offer right away in the first place, Harry confirmed. He knew that he needed to act like he was genuinely contemplating the offer. Accepting the offer right now would make Harry look like a gold digger, especially when his relationship with Sirius was only superficial. Can I think about this before making a decision? Harry asked with a thoughtful look on his face, and Sirius nodded his head in agreement. Sure. Take as much time as you need. I don't want to force you or anything, and I would also understand if you refuse, Sirius said with an understanding look on his face. Thanks. Harry smiled softly at the man. By the way, I was wondering, if you disown Narcissa, wouldn't her son, Draco, become ineligible to inherit the fortune and title, wouldn't he? Harry asked curiously. From what he knew about the pureblood laws, kicking Narcissa out of the family was the easiest way to secure the Black Fortune and title. Yes. Yes, that would have been the case if I could only kick her out. Even with the title of Lord Black, I have some restrictions. I can't disown Narcissa willy-nilly as she hasn't done anything wrong. I have already started the process of disowning Bellatrix. She is a criminal and she had sullied the name of the Black family, so according to the laws of our family, she had committed one of the gravest sins, but unlike Bellatrix, Narcissa is a perfect little housewife, Sirius growled in annoyance. If Lucius was sentenced to Azkaban, then I could have used him as an excuse to kick her and spawn out of the family, but as I said, my hands are tied. Sirius slumped back in his chair with a defeated look on his face. Meanwhile, Harry was frowning after hearing his words. That can't be right. I mean, you are the family head, aren't you? So, you should have the power to kick anyone out of the family, shouldn't you? Harry asked while frowning, but before Sirius could start speaking, Tonks decided to answer his question. I don't know how things are in this country, but back in Britain, being a pureblood means a lot. Most half-bloods never get promoted even if they work their arses off, and it would have happened to me too, regardless of the fact that I am a metamorphmagus, but my situation is going to change as Sirius is bringing my mum back into the family, Tonks explained bitterly. You have to understand, the House of Black used to be pureblood fanatics. They supported Grindelwald and they supported you-know-who too. Andy and I are probably the only ones with the black name who didn't support the pure-blood propaganda. Sirius scowled unhappily. Muggle hunting is not a crime according to our family's legacy. I see. Thank you for answering my questions. Harry thanked both Sirius and Tonks for clearing his doubts. Now, he had a much better idea about the situation in Britain. Think nothing of it. Sirius waved his hands dismissively. No problem, kiddo. Tonks beamed at Harry cheerfully. Is there something else you guys wanted to talk about? Harry asked as he was also starting to feel a bit hungry. Well, I still want to get to know you more, but I think Tonks will eat my head if I starve her anymore. Sirius chuckled at the face Tonks was making. Now, Tonks is a well-educated and a well-mannered woman, so she maturely stuck out her tongue at him. Yes, I am also feeling quite worried. Harry hummed in amusement, only to receive a burning glare from Tonks. Well, I do know a good place where we could feed her and we would also be able to chat without interruptions, Harry said in a mirthful tone as he slowly stood up. Well then, lead the way, Captain. Sirius exclaimed as he comically saluted Harry, making Harry chuckle at his antics. Harry started to walk toward the door with Sirius on his heels. Haha. Very funny, guys. Very funny, Tonks muttered dryly as stared at their retreating backs with a bland look on her face, but nonetheless, she still followed the duo out of the room while plotting vengeance. It was dark when Harry finally returned to his apartment. He was completely satisfied with the first meeting as he was able to establish a favorable image in front of his godfather. Tonks was Tonks and she was basically a clumsy glutton with the ability to turn into anyone. There was a chance that he might be able to pull her into his side, but it wasn't the right time to make a move. After having lunch in a nice restaurant, Harry decided to show the two of them around while chatting. Sirius told him about some of the pranks they pulled at school with his father, and hearing him, Tonks also decided to reveal her own pranking history to the duo with a proud look on her face. Overall, the three of them had a great time as Harry showed them around the Alley of Druids. Unfortunately, Sirius had already booked a portkey to return, so they needed to leave even though Sirius clearly wanted to stay. Harry took off his outer robe and hung it on the coat stand before making his way toward the desk. He grabbed a blank parchment and a quill before he started to pen down a letter to Jacqueline. He decided to spend the night in his apartment as he had much to discuss with his mom before he could call it a day. Just thinking about the prospect of finally starting something amorous with his mom was making him feel excited. It didn't take him long to finish the letter, and as soon as he was done, Hedwig hooted excitedly as she flew down from her perch and landed in front of Harry. She nipped at his fingers affectionately. "You are such a good girl," Harry said as he started to pet her. She preened her feathers at the compliment. After a couple of minutes, Hedwig huffed and spread her wings, signifying that she was ready to go. Harry smiled and tied the letter to her leg. Hedwig hopped happily and nipped at his fingers affectionately before she finally took flight. Harry stared at the leaving form of Hedwig out of the window with a soft smile on his face. He might be biased, but Hedwig is the most beautiful and smartest owl in the whole world. He sighed and rolled his shoulders before he finally started to make his way toward the bathroom. After entering the bathroom, he quickly took off his clothes and stepped under the shower. He knew that his mom was watching him, and just thinking about that made his member go hard, but this time Harry decided to let it be, instead of trying to get it down by exercising a clemency. Harry knew what he was thinking about was taboo, but that made it even more exciting even though Harry couldn't understand why. Meanwhile, Lily was staring at her Hadrian with clear hunger in her eyes. Her mind was filled with an emotion, which she shouldn't be feeling in the first place. She knew it was probably wrong, but she was long past caring about all that nonsense. She couldn't help but feel this intense need to be with her own son. Her core twitched at the thought, and she wouldn't be surprised if her knickers were damp. She needed him and she was going to have him. She hungrily stared at her Hadrian's hardened member. It was standing proudly at 6 inches tall, but her Hadrian was only 14. He still had a lot of room to grow, and she knew for sure that he was only going to get bigger in the next few years. Yet, she was going to be a very happy and satisfied woman in the future. She licked her lips and barely held herself back from moaning as she ended up rubbing her thighs unconsciously. Harry quickly finished his shower and walked out of the bathroom warped in a towel. Lily stared at the visible tent in the towel and whimpered in disappointment as she didn't appreciate the fact that her Hadrian's throbbing member was no longer visible to her. Lily decided that she needed to take the lead and make the first move, or the two of them would probably keep jumping around for the rest of the night. "Hadrian, take off that towel and let me marvel at you, son," Lily breathed out huskily, making Hadrian freeze in his tracks. His breath hitched and his cock twitched painfully. His hand slowly reached out toward his towel and he unwrapped it. The towel pooled around his feet, and Lily wasn't able to stop a moan from escaping her mouth when she saw her son in all of his glory. Chapter 81, Mother and Son, 3. A/N, I noticed that a lot of you weren't happy with the last chapter due to the Harry x Lily, and if you were one of those who didn't like the last chapter, then you should skip this one altogether as this chapter contains R17 scene between the two of them. Harry felt a tingle of pleasure course through his body when he heard his mom moan at the sight of his throbbing member. He knew whatever he was feeling was wrong. He shouldn't be feeling something like this, but at the same time, he knew it was too late for him. Now that he had come this far, there was no going back for him. He couldn't live without his mom. What now? Harry asked dumbly. He might be a genius or something beyond genius thanks to his new powers, but he didn't know what he should be doing right now. Having the talk didn't mean he knew what to do. He could have followed his instincts, but unfortunately, he didn't have anyone standing right in front of him to act his instincts on. Lily giggled at his innocent question. She could understand what he was going through. It was the same with her too. Why don't you give it a stroke? Lily suggested huskily. Harry gulped nervously and reached out toward his manhood, but all of a sudden he froze when a treacherous emotion bubbled inside his mind. He couldn't believe he was feeling this right now, but on the other hand, he was glad that his guilt decided to rear its head right before he ended up doing something, which can't be ignored. He couldn't help but wonder what his father might think about him if the man saw him right now. Yes, he knew that his mom no longer cared for the man and he never had any sort of connection with the man as he never knew him. He didn't know much about the man except for what his mom told him, and his mom rarely brought him up, so he wasn't able to form a deep bond with him, but he couldn't help but feel a bit of guilt. The man died for him and he felt like he was betraying the man. No matter how much he tried to justify his actions, the feeling remained. What happened? Talk to me, Hadrian, Lily asked, her voice filled with concern. She immediately noticed his hesitation and the storm of emotions he was experiencing. She could feel the anguish he was feeling through their connection and she needed to know why he was feeling like this. Harry immediately found himself in a conundrum. Half of his mind was telling him to reveal the truth to her as it was clear that his mom was worried about him and he didn't want to make her needlessly worry about him, but at the same time, he knew that his mom would push him to cross the line as she felt the same about him. That is why the other part of his mind was telling him to clam up and forget everything that happened. While contemplating his options, he made his way toward the bed and plopped down at the edge of the bed. Lily decided to wait even though waiting was quite painful and stressful for her. She knew that she couldn't push him too much and there were some things Harry needed to decide on his own. She couldn't make all the choices for him for the rest of his life even though she badly wanted to. Mom, do you really feel the same? Harry began to speak, but before he could finish, Lily cut him off. Harry wanted to ask if she was sure about her feelings or not, but Lily already knew what he was going to ask, so she started to speak before he could finish. Yes, Hadrian, I also feel the same for you, Lily stated firmly, her voice full of conviction. The feelings I have for you are not something a mother should have for her own son, but I am completely fine with it, Lily admitted proudly, as she wasn't ashamed of her feelings, nor she was worried over the fact that he might reject her feelings. For me, you are the most precious thing in the world and I want to have something more with you than we already have, Lily said softly as she started to convey her emotions through their connection. Harry's body shivered and his member twitched when he felt the emotions his mom was feeling. There was no need for Lily to feel nervous or worried in the slightest as she knew that her plan would work. It was simply impossible for her plan to fail at this stage. Her Hadrian has gone too far to back out right now, and not that she would allow him to back out. To be honest, she wasn't sure why her Hadrian was hesitating, but she did have a good idea. She guessed that he was probably feeling guilty or something like that. What about Dad? Harry stuttered out nervously. Ha! Called it. Lily barely herself back from exclaiming. Well, she was expecting this to come up somewhere down the line, but she was glad that this came up right now. It was the perfect time to get rid of his misplaced guilt, as the guilt didn't have much time to fester inside him. Lily wanted their relationship to progress smoothly and his misplaced guilt would only get in the way, so Lily pondered for a few seconds before she finally began to answer. What about him? I may have loved him once, but I don't feel anything for him anymore. Is that wrong? I don't know. He isn't here, and if you are feeling some sort of guilt, then don't, Lily explained in a firm tone. I think he will be happy that I once again found happiness, Lily added softly. Even if it's with me, Harry asked incredulously. Maybe he won't be happy at first, but he will understand, Lily said firmly, leaving no room for arguments, and she knew that it was over. Hadrian was hers. Okay, Harry mumbled as he slowly reached out and wrapped his fingers around his hardened member. Just thinking about the fact that his mom was probably watching him hungrily, made his cock throb. His breath shuddered as he finally started to stroke himself. He knew all about masturbation as his mom had told him everything during the talk, but this is the first time he was putting it into practice. Yes, just like that. You are doing great, son, Lily commented cheerfully. She wanted to stroke him with her own hands, but right now, she was kind of incorporeal. Maybe she could ask him to pay her a visit when he was asleep so that she could give it a try, but she also had another idea in her mind. His member throbbed in pleasure as his mom's voice rang out inside his mind. It was wrong on so many levels, but the guilty pleasure was making it more exciting for him than it already was. His pace increased and he finally started to feel a pressure build inside his balls. After almost a minute and a half, his load exploded. Ropes after ropes of cum shot out off his member, staining the carpet on the floor. Lily, who was watching the whole scene through Harry's eyes, was impressed by the amount of load her Hadrian released. Yes, it only took him a minute and a half to reach climax, but she couldn't blame him. This was the first time he was masturbating, and from the amount of load he released, his balls were probably filled to the brim. Don't stop, keep stroking until you are finally done, Lily breathed out huskily, and Harry followed her instructions as he continued to stroke himself until the last drop of his load trickled out of his member. A grin formed on his face as he slumped down on the bed while breathing heavily. It felt amazing. I wonder if you enjoyed that, Lily asked mischievously, and both of them knew that it was a rhetorical question. Though, Lily was quite surprised that Hadrian was still hard. Yes, she was right, she was going to be a very happy and satisfied woman in the future. Harry didn't bother to answer her question and simply started to stroke himself again as he was still hard. It was supposed to go down after doing it once, but Harry realized that it probably had to do something with all the rituals he had performed or his newfound powers. Meanwhile, Lily, who was watching him intently, slowly shoved her hand inside her pants and started to rub herself. The scene was simply too much for her to hold herself back any longer. Harry soon realized what his mom was doing, and he almost came when he heard her moans inside his mind. Harry badly wanted to take a peek inside his mind so that he could see his mom right now, but he held himself back. All in due time. Don't watch me, Lily breathed out as she pushed a finger inside her snatch. For now, just listen to me, she added as she started to match his rhythm. She wanted him to only listen to her moans for the time being to build the anticipation. Harry would be lying if he said that he wasn't disappointed, but right now he didn't care. Her moans were more than enough for him at this moment. After a couple of minutes, the two of them finally reached their completion at the same time, and they continued their activities for the next half an hour. That was amazing, Hadrian, Lily breathed out tiredly as she orgasmed for the 5th time. Right now, she was lying while breathing heavily as she could feel the mental fatigue. Since she was incorporeal, she wouldn't experience dehydration or tiredness no matter how many times she orgasmed, but she could still experience mental fatigue, and right now, her mind was too tired to continue anymore. Yeah, Mom, it was amazing. I loved every moment of it, Harry breathed out. His member was finally down, but he knew that he could probably get it up again after some rest. I loved it too, Hadrian. You have no idea how pent up I was, Lily giggled at his words. By the way, sorry for keeping you from watching me, Lily added as she slowly sat up. It's all right, Mom. Good things always come to those who wait, Harry returned mischievously. Exactly, and I didn't want you to watch me because I want to build your anticipation. Right now, you are only allowed to listen to me. Anticipation keeps a relationship healthy, Lily explained with a grin. All right, Harry wanted to say that their relationship was anything but normal, but he could feel her plan working. He was already looking forward to being able to finally watch her. So, he simply nodded his head in understanding and flicked his hand to clean the mess from the carpet. His whole body was covered in a thin sheen of sweat, so he decided to take another shower. So, without wasting any more time, he entered the bathroom and turned on the shower. When he was finally done, he turned off the shower without bothering to cover himself. He grabbed a fresh pair of clothes from his wardrobe and started to get dressed. When he was finally done, he started to make his way toward his study desk while wondering about the amazing day he had. He was feeling a lot better than he ever had, now that he was no longer wallowing in unnecessary guilt. With a goofy look on his face, he plopped down in the chair and started to recall everything he did with his mom only half an hour ago. He started to wonder about the things they could do after she finally regained a body. Well, he was going to mark this day as the second best day of his life. The day he met his mom was still the best day of his life. Chapter 82, The Enemy Who Planned, I. Malfoy Manor, Wiltshire, England, July 14, August. Lucius Malfoy was sitting in his study with a glass of fire whiskey in his hands. He snorted in disdain and took a small sip from his glass. An opened letter sitting on his desk, which he was trying to burn with his glare, but it wasn't working out for him. The letter was from one of his like-minded friends from the Department of Magical Transportation. Apparently, Sirius Black went to meet that filthy half-blood who ran away to the other side of the world, and now that filthy half-blood was coming to their shores for the Quidditch World Cup. Lucius gnashed his teeth in anger. Only if their master had won, then the half-bloods and the mudbloods would have long gone from their world, but their master failed. He failed to kill a child. Lucius sneered in disdain. He supported the man so that they could claim their rightful place in the world. He remembered kneeling in front of that man as he believed in that man's power. Lucius had never felt so much power, and he was sure that they would win, but unfortunately, it never became a reality thanks to a filthy half-blood. They were winning the war, but then all of a sudden, their master started to become distracted. Lucius didn't know what happened, but almost a year later, their master declared that he was going to kill the Potters and the Longbottoms, as they had been thorns in their path for quite some time and he had lost his patience. He still remembered Serevis begging their master to spare Lily, and surprisingly their master agreed to spare that mudblood. To be honest, none of them believed that their master would agree to spare the mudblood, but he agreed. He still remembered how a lot of Death Eaters were dissatisfied with that decision, but a single look from their master shut everyone up. Bellatrix, his most devoted follower, wanted to tag along, but their master refused, saying that he would take care of the Potters and the Longbottoms on his own. None of them had any reason to doubt his words, as they had seen their master in action, and there was no way the Potters or the Longbottoms could have done anything against their master, but the unthinkable happened, and the Potter half-blood not only survived a killing curse, but he also killed their lord. At first, nobody believed the story. After all, their lord was probably the strongest wizard in the world, and how could a child kill him? Though their lord was gone, that fact was undeniable. While Lucius didn't believe the filthy half-blood baby could have killed their lord, he suspected that Albus Dumbledore could have laid a trap for their lord. Yes, that was quite possible. Alas, their lord was gone, regardless of the fact who did it, but Lucius was one of the first ones to realize that now that their lord was gone, they would lose. The Ministry was already fighting back with the Unforgivables, and if they continued to fight the Ministry, they would lose. That is when he started to concoct a plan to save themselves from the Ministry, but before he could come up with anything, Bellatrix, Rodolphus, Robustan Lestrange, and Barty Crouch Jr. were caught red-handed while torturing the Longbottoms for the whereabouts of their lord. There was not much Lucius could do for them, and he wasn't planning to in the first place. In fact, he was glad that the four of them were going to be out of the way. Bellatrix and Barty were the most fanatics of his followers without question, while Rodolphus and Robustan were probably up there somewhere. The four of them would have never disavowed their lord in such a manner. It didn't take him long to come up with a way to escape his charges. His lawyer obviously helped, but he was the one who came up with the idea of using the Imperious defense, though he knew that he needed to move quickly, and once again his lawyer agreed. Lucius informed all of his friends about his plan, and in exchange, he curried some favor from all of them. As soon as he was done informing his friends, he surrendered himself to the DMLE, claiming that he was held under the Imperious curse. He wasn't the only one, all of his friends followed him in droves and surrendered to the DMLE, claiming that they were also held under the Imperious curse, but now that you-know-who is dead, they were no longer under his thrall. Millicent Bagnold ate their story without much convincing, as she wanted to get over the unpleasant rise as quickly as she could, and the hefty donations they promised to the Ministry obviously helped. The Light faction and some who lost some of their family members from the neutral faction made a lot of noise, but without any proof, their arguments fell flat. Some from the Light faction even asked for them to be tried under Veritaserum, but Lucius had already planned for that. Their lawyer argued that they had been held under the influence of the Imperious curse for quite a long time, and they were mentally weak right now, so using Veritaserum might break their mind. The argument wasn't wrong, so there wasn't much anybody could have done to get them tried under the influence of Veritaserum. After everything was settled, Lucius realized that their lord was wrong. Their lord shouldn't have tried to take over the ministry by force, instead, he should have taken a much subtler route. He knew that he wasn't powerful like his lord, but his strength lay elsewhere. It didn't take him long to find the perfect candidate for his objective. Cornelius Fudge was an ambitious man working as the junior minister in the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes when Lucius found him. It was way too easy to manipulate the man. At first, Lucius befriended the man and then he started to help the man rise through the ranks. By the time Millicent Bagnold finally retired, Cornelius Fudge was in a perfect position to become the next Minister of Magic. Lucius and his friends obviously helped the man rise to the position with their generous donation, and now Lucius could confidently say that the minister was in his pocket, but the minister wasn't all-powerful. He did have a lot of power, but in some regards, he was kind of powerless. For example, Cornelius wasn't able to stop Arthur Weasley from raiding wizarding homes, so Lucius had to take matters into his own hands. Unfortunately, his plan didn't pan out like he was hoping to. He decided to hand over the artifact given by his lord to discredit Arthur Weasley by handing it over to his youngest, but nothing happened. Lucius had no idea what happened, but there wasn't much he could do about that. He would have been a lot more worried about the lost artifact if his lord wasn't gone. From the words of his lord, the artifact could have been used to open the Chamber of Secrets, but when he didn't hear about any incidents, he was forced to give up. Hence he had to come up with another plan. After some consideration, Lucius finally decided on his course of action. He decided to get help from the neutral faction. Cyrus Greengrass, the leader of the neutral faction, didn't want to help him at first, but the mention of some funds changed his gears. Cyrus Greengrass was an opportunist man, who only cared about his family businesses, and Lucius could respect that. With the help of the neutral faction, he was finally able to put a stop to the raids, and once again, the rest of his plans started to move smoothly, but once again, his plans were interrupted when Albus Bloody Dumbledore captured Peter Pettigrew. He was expecting Sirius Black to die in prison so that his son could inherit the Black title and the fortune through his wife, but now that Sirius was free, he obviously wasn't going to allow that to happen. The goblin on his payroll had informed him that apparently, Sirius was planning to adopt that filthy half-blood into the family, so that he could pass on the title and the fortune to that half-blood. Lucius couldn't have that. He refused to accept that. The Black title and the fortune belonged to his son, not some filthy half-blood coward. Lucius gritted his teeth in anger and gulped down the liquid in the glass. Well, if the boy died. Good riddance then, Lucius mused with an amused look on his face. The boy was coming to Britain for the Quidditch World Cup, and it would be the perfect chance to strike. Throughout the last decade, the International Magical Society had stopped fearing them. They needed to install the fear back into their minds. It would be like killing two birds with a single spell. While everyone would be busy running around like headless chickens, a group would locate Harry Potter and kill the boy. If Sirius Black also died, then it would be like killing three birds with a single spell. Lucius hummed and started to prepare the plan. He decided that he and his friends would be the ones to attack the crowd and create the distraction, while he decided to hire a mercenary group to kill Harry Potter and Sirius Black, just in case either Black or Potter survived. Lucius smiled fearfully as he continued to refine his plans. The plan needed to be carried out perfectly, as he wouldn't get a chance like this again, and if everything went without a hitch, he would remove all of his annoyances in one fell swoop. Chapter 83, The World Cup Most Special, I. Jacqueline's Pad, August 15, 1994. Harry looked at the completely unscathed surroundings and a wolfish grin appeared on his face. The results were much better than he was expecting them to be. He raised his right in front of his face and steam of blue flames gushed out of his hands, but the flames didn't spread. The flames were completely in his control. For the next few seconds, he kept staring at the flames before he clenched his fist and the flames disappeared. I don't like your smile. I hope you aren't planning to become a Dark Lord, Jacqueline huffed from the side, making the smile on Harry's face widen. And what are you going to do if that is exactly what I am planning to become? Harry asked in an amused tone as he slightly inclined his head so that he could look at Jacqueline. Well, then I would need to swear my allegiance to you as soon as possible, Jacqueline answered with a grin. Maybe convince my family to join your cause too, Jacqueline added thoughtfully while rubbing her chin. Really? I never thought of you as someone who might serve a Dark Lord, Harry pointed out, making Jacqueline roll her shoulders dismissively. I won't serve just anyone, but I don't mind serving you if you decide to go down the path of a Dark Lord, and to be honest, Dark Lord is basically a title given by the Ministry, or the ICW, to anyone who is trying to rise against the system, Jacqueline explained, and Harry hummed in agreement. He also knew about that. The ministries and the ICW have used this tactic to turn the citizens against anyone who tried to rise against them. I admit, you have given this a lot of thought. Harry muttered, looking amused as he finally turned around completely toward Jacqueline before a disappointed look flashed on his face. Unfortunately, I am not planning to become a Dark Lord, but I might get branded with the title of Dark Lord somewhere down the line, Harry explained, making Jacqueline raise her eyebrows at him. Really? Jacqueline asked, looking confused. If Voldemort ever returns, and he will, there will be war, and I am not planning to fight with disarming charms and stunners, Harry explained, and a look of realization finally dawned on Jacqueline's face. I see. Well, too bad for them, I guess, Jacqueline shrugged dismissively. By the way, what were those blue flames? Jacqueline asked, looking extremely curious. In 1927, Gellert Grindelwald used a spell called Protego Diabolica to kill a bunch of Aurors in the Lestrange Mausoleum, and the blue flames I am using, Harry said, and once again released a stream of blue flames from his hand before he dispersed the flames and his eyes turned sharp. Are the flames of Protego Diabolica? These flames would obliterate anyone or anything I consider my enemy. Even ashes won't remain, Harry explained with a wolfish grin. And anyone or anything I consider my ally will be left unscathed. Even if they consider someone or something insignificant, they will be left unscathed, Harry finished, and by the time he finished his explanation, Jacqueline was staring at him like he had grown a second head. Where did you find a spell like that? Jacqueline breathed out, but she didn't look worried. In fact, she was barely holding herself back from begging Harry to teach her the spell. In the Ancient One's library, Harry answered with a knowing smile on his face, as he already knew what Jacqueline was thinking. He didn't know exactly why, but the Ancient One had kept the records of all the spells used by all the Dark Lords in recorded history in her library. The Ancient One didn't look too pleased when she found him scouring through those records, but she decided to simply give him her blessings before walking away. The Ancient One said that she possibly couldn't stop him from learning any of those spells, but she almost begged him to not use some of the spells in those records. Harry agreed with her on that. Some of the spells were so horrible that it was simply better to leave them forever forgotten, but some of the spells were quite useful. He learned Fiend Fire, Protego Diabolica, along with quite a few useful dark spells from the records. From the records, he also got to learn how the Dark Mark was created, and Harry had to admit, he was quite intrigued by the Dark Mark, but for whatever reason, the name of the person who created the Dark Mark was removed from the records. According to his mom, Dumbledore said that it was Voldemort who created the Dark Mark, and Lily also believed that to be true. The spell might have existed in some other form, but she was sure that the Dark Mark was created by Voldemort. The utilization of Parseltongue in the creation of the Dark Mark also pointed in that direction. He was almost sure that it was Voldemort who created the Dark Mark, but he couldn't help but wonder why the Ancient One decided to remove his name from the records. After some consideration, Harry finally came up with a theory. He suspected that Voldemort's real name was mentioned in the records, as the blanks in the records were much bigger than the name Voldemort would take, and there was no way a mother would name her son Voldemort, no matter how much she hated him. Well, he couldn't be sure about the last part, since he had seen how Andromeda Tonks had named her daughter. Alas, he believed that Voldemort's real name might play a key role in the man's defeat, and the Ancient One wanted him to find Voldemort's real name on his own. That was probably why the name was removed from the records. To be honest, Harry didn't mind. Killing the man through his own efforts would give him more satisfaction. All right, teach me, Jacqueline demanded as she stepped forward. And you still owe me another lesson. You haven't taught me how to create those portal thingies. Don't think I forgot that, Jacqueline griped unhappily, making Harry raise his hands in the air. I have talked with the Ancient One about that. She doesn't have a problem if I teach you, but you would either need to draw power from other dimensions or you would need to draw power from me if you want to learn sorcery, Harry explained, and Jacqueline nodded her head in understanding. All right. So, how am I supposed to draw power from these other dimensions? Jacqueline asked as she raised her eyebrows in question. No, you will be drawing your power from me. You don't need to depend on other dimensions when I am here, Harry declared, and Jacqueline couldn't help but look at him questioningly after hearing his words. Are you sure about that? Are you sure you want to share your power with me? Jacqueline asked with a slight frown. Harry simply gave her a nod before he started to speak. Yet, I have a lot of power and it is growing with each day. I don't think I will ever run out of my power even as I am right now, Harry answered with a smile. That wasn't the only reason though. He wanted to see how much power Jacqueline could draw from his reactor, and if his reactor would start producing more power to compensate for the power Jacqueline would be drawing. All right. So, when are we starting? Jacqueline asked with a beaming smile on her face. Even though she was worried, she couldn't help but feel excited at the prospect of drawing power from Harry. She had seen how much power his core was producing, and if she could even use a fraction of that power, she could become a powerhouse. After we return from Britain, Harry answered mischievously, making Jacqueline pout. Fine. So, are you excited to meet your godfather? Silly question, of course, you are, Jacqueline gushed out excitedly. You can say that, but he isn't the only reason why I am excited. I am going back there after 3 years and I never got to see magical Britain, so it is going to be a completely new experience for me. Not only that, I will get my hands on the Black Library. Harry grinned widely. Nerd! Jacqueline exclaimed, only to receive an annoyed glare from Harry. I shouldn't have expected anything less from a nerd like you. Jacqueline sighed with a mock look of horror on her face. Did you read all the books you were able to find on camping? Jacqueline accused him with a horrified gasp. Of course not. Harry immediately denied the accusation. He was never going to admit that she was right. It was a secret he was planning to take to his grave. Weird. Jacqueline mused thoughtfully. Well, we should head to Brittany's house, Jacqueline suggested, and Harry nodded his head in understanding. He was more than satisfied with his control over the flames of Protego Diabolica. After learning the Fiend Fire and the Protego Diabolica spell, he decided to learn pyromancy, and for his pyromancy skill, he decided to use the flames of the Protego Diabolica spell. He could have used the flames of Fiend Fire for his pyromancy skill, as he could handle Fiend Fire too, but the flames of Fiend Fire would consume anything in its path. It won't differentiate between friends and enemies, whereas the flames of Protego Diabolica were a lot more versatile. That is why he decided to use them for his pyromancy skill. Chapter 84, The World Cup Most Special, 2. Department of Magical Transportation, Ministry of Magic, Britain, August 15, 1994. Harry, Jacqueline, and Brittany gracefully landed on their feet as the porte-caises dropped them inside the porte-caises office. The three of them looked around the room. The marble-tiled room was practically bare except for the employee standing by the door, and Harry didn't know if he could count the wizard as decoration. Whew! I was expecting our arrival to be rough, Brittany pointed out thoughtfully. Yet. Usually, international port-keys are quite rough, Jacqueline agreed with Brittany. Thank you, we paid special attention to your porte-caises, keeping Mr. Potter and Mr. Black in mind. The employee, who was standing by the door, spoke up. The man approached the trio with a jovial look on his face and started to speak again. Good afternoon, Mr. Potter, Miss Harper, and Miss Lawrence. I am Samuel Abbott, and allow me to welcome all three of you to Magical Britain. The man introduced himself as Samuel Abbott. Good afternoon to you too, Mr. Abbott. Harry greeted him back with a smile on his face, and following his example, Jacqueline and Brittany also greeted the man in a similar fashion. Mr. Potter, you have no idea how pleased we are to have you finally back in Britain. What happened to your godfather was terrible. Simply terrible. So I can understand why Headmaster Dumbledore decided to send you overseas after everything. Samuel finished with a disappointed sigh. Harry couldn't help but raise his eyebrows at his words. Even Jacqueline and Brittany raised their eyebrows at him in question. Well, he did what he had to do, Harry answered with a shrug, playing along, but he decided to keep his words generic as he had no idea what the man was talking about. Yes. Yes. The man frantically nodded his head in agreement. Well. It seems I have taken enough of your time. The man sighed and pulled out a parchment and a quill from his robes and handed it over to Harry. Harry simply smiled politely at the man. No, it is fine, he said before he looked down at the parchment and found his name. Harry quickly signed the document and waved for the document to flash before handing it over to Brittany. She looked over the document before signing it. Brittany waited for a moment for the document to flash before handing it over to Jacqueline. She accepted the parchment and looked it over for a bit before she signed it too. A moment later, the document flashed again and Jacqueline handed over the parchment and the quill to the man. That takes care of the procedure. It was nice to finally meet you, Mr. Potter. Have a nice stay. Samuel said while waving at them with a smile on his face. It was nice to meet you too, Mr. Abbott. Have a nice day. Harry waved at the man before he started to walk toward the door, followed by Jacqueline and Brittany. After that, without wasting any more time, the trio left the room, only to find Sirius waiting for them outside the room along with a portly little man in a lime green bowler hat and a woman in a horrible pink cardigan. Harry didn't know why, but all of a sudden he had this impulse to obliterate the woman dressed in the pink cardigan. He would admit that the woman was ugly as foo*k. Harry wasn't completely sure if she was a woman at all. It was more like a humanoid frog, masquerading as a human. Yet, she was that ugly, but that was no reason to kill her. Harry! Sirius exclaimed cheerfully as he approached Harry with a bright smile on his face. He arrived in front of Harry and pulled him into a hug. Harry smiled politely as he hugged him back. I hope that the portkaya wasn't rough. Sirius asked as he finally pulled away from Harry. The portkaya was the best I ever had, Harry answered as he gestured toward his company. Let me introduce you to my friends. Harry pointed at his friends, making Sirius give him a sly look, but before Harry could start introducing his friends, someone decided to rudely interrupt them. Harry turned to look at the person who dared to interrupt him and his gaze landed on the woman dressed in the pink cardigan. The woman sweetly smiled at him and disgust welled up inside him. He felt like he had stepped on some shit. Mr. Potter, we are really glad to finally have you back. The minister and I have been waiting for your arrival for quite some time, the woman said sweetly, and Harry glanced toward the portly man beside her. Apparently, he was the Minister of Magic. If the woman didn't tell him that he was the minister, then he wouldn't have considered the man to be the minister even for a moment. The man was unassuming and looked kind of dumb. Ha ha ha. Thanks for the Dolores. I am sure that Mr. Potter is feeling quite nervous now. The man took off his bowler hat and chuckled jovially. Hello, young man. I am Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic. The man approached Harry and extended his hand. Harry noticed the scowl on Sirius' face, but he still accepted the man's hand. Strong grip. I like that. I like that. The man continued to babble on his own. I told Albus that he was overestimating the danger, but he wouldn't listen to me. No. Cornelius exclaimed in exasperation. I am flattered that you came here to welcome me yourself, Minister, Harry said politely as he smiled at the man even though he didn't want to. He knew that he needed to play nice for the time being. Haha. It's no big deal, Cornelius waved his hand dismissively. The boy who lived was coming back to our shores, I had to come here by myself. Cornelius answered cheerfully. Harry, my boy, I know, what happened to your godfather was horrible. It was terrible business. Really terrible. I can't tell you how frustrated I am at the previous administration. How could they sentence the heir of an ancient and noble family to Azkaban without a trial? I would never understand. The man shook his head sadly as he patted Harry's back. Harry nodded his head in understanding even though he wanted to punch the man. He knew what the man was trying to do. He wasn't experienced in politicking, but he wasn't stupid. By the way, now that your godfather is finally free, why don't you fully return to your homeland? I am sure that your parents would approve. The man smiled beamingly. Harry's eyes narrowed at the man, but the man seemed to be completely oblivious to that. Ah! Minister, why don't we leave this for later? I am sure my godson and his friends are quite tired. Sirius decided to jump in before Harry could come up with a retort. He was trying to play it nice, but they were making it impossibly hard for him, and with his murderous mom whispering into his ears, it was getting harder for him to hold back with each passing moment. PSSHH. I am sure that he can give the minister some time and his friends don't look that tired. The woman in the pink cardigan interrupted, taking the minister's side. He needs to know that the people of his homeland miss him and it is better to make connections with the proper kind of people. The woman gave Jacqueline and Brittany a sidelong glance. I am sure that you don't count yourself as someone proper, do you, Froggy? Harry questioned innocently, but both Sirius and Cornelius noticed the coldness in his eyes. The woman reeled back as if she was struck before the surprised look on her face morphed into a look of fury. Sirius stifled a laugh, as he decided to interrupt before the horrid woman could come up with a retort. Haha. I am sure that she didn't mean it like that. Minister, I am sure you and your secretary are quite busy, so why don't we leave it here? My godson didn't have lunch, so I am sure they are hungry too. Sirius spoke jovially, but there was a hardness in his voice. Ha ha ha. You are right. The minister chuckled nervously before he turned toward the woman. Her face was almost red right now as she wasn't able to deliver her retort, so she simply decided to fume for the time being. I am sure that Harry didn't mean it, Dolores. The hunger probably made him hungry. Come on, Dolores. We shouldn't take any more of their time. The man said jovially as he started to lead Dolores, who was still fuming, out of the room. Apparently, that happened. Jacqueline muttered with a scowl as she stared at the retreating backs of the British Minister of Magic and his secretary. They were quite rude. Brittany huffed unhappily as she crossed her arms in front of her haughtily. Yet. Sorry, Harry. Apparently, he is the minister and I couldn't exactly have asked him to leave. Sirius apologized, looking a bit tired before a look of pride appeared on his face. Though I loved that retort. Calling her Froggy. If this gets out then you are going to be their hero. Sirius cheered pridefully as he patted Harry's back. I presume she isn't well liked, Harry muttered with a mock look of sadness on his face. Ah. Well, before someone else rudely interrupts us. This is Jacqueline Harper, Harry said and pointed toward the older girl accompanying her. And this is Brittany Lawrence. Then he pointed at the younger girl and introduced her. The unpleasant rise aside, it is nice to meet you too, my ladies. Sirius dramatically bowed his head. Why don't we head back to my house, so that we could continue this conversation? Sirius suggested and the trio immediately agreed to his offer. Chapter 85, The Godfather Most Extraordinaire, I. Luton, London. Welcome to my humble abode. Sirius exclaimed as he opened his arms wide in a dramatic fashion. Why the hell do you have the fireplace outside your house? Harry blurted out with an incredulous look on his face. And for the records, that's not a humble abode, that's a freaking mansion, Harry added while giving Sirius a bland look. Well, it's a humble abode for me, Sirius answered with a shrug. This is way bigger than our house, Brittany said as she looked around at the property. All of this is yours? Brittany asked as she gestured at the massive front yard. Currently, the group was standing near the fountain as the fireplace was attached to the fountain, facing the house. Now, who the foo *k connects the fireplace to a fountain? Apparently, Sirius Black does. Of course. Sirius exclaimed brightly. Everything within that wall is owned by yours truly, he admitted smugly before turning toward Harry. This is the public flue and that is why this is outside the house. This is for the people who aren't added to the wards, Sirius explained with a shrug. Wait. Does that mean you have another flue inside the house? Jacqueline asked in an incredulous tone. Sirius beamed at her with a bright smile on his face as he nodded his head. Of course, I do. Right now, that one is only used by me and the Tonks family, Sirius answered with a grin. Come on. I will add the three of you to the wards and then the three of you could also use that flue, Sirius said as he started to lead the trio toward the house. It seems he still loves wasting money, Lily pointed out thoughtfully. It's a good plan even though he is basically wasting his precious gold, Harry grumbled unhappily inside his mind. He is a cheapskate, but he is a proud cheapskate. Now that he holds the mantle of Lord Black, he has gold to spend frivolously, Lily pointed out in an amused tone. By the way, you guys didn't bring any luggage? Sirius asked when all of a sudden he remembered that Harry and his friends weren't carrying any luggage. Don't worry about any luggage. We brought shrinkable trunks with us, Harry said as he patted his robe. I see. That's much better than having to drag your trunks everywhere around with you, Sirius muttered thoughtfully just before the four of them finally arrived in front of the massive mansion. So, is there anything you guys want for lunch? Sirius asked as he placed his hands on the handle of the double doors. No, we already had lunch, but we played along as it was a good excuse for getting rid of the minister and his ugly whore, Jacqueline growled as she spat out the ugly whore venomously, making Sirius roar in laughter. Jacqueline was already good in his books with just this statement. That was brilliant. Sirius exclaimed while laughing as he wiped a fake tear from the corner of his eye. He finally started to calm down and pushed the door open. So, guys, what do you think? He asked smugly as he turned his head to watch their reactions. Ha! It never gets old. Sirius exclaimed excitedly inside his mind when he saw the shocked look on all three of their faces. Sirius, I was wondering if you have a library? Harry asked as the group finally entered the house, only to be greeted by a massive ballroom with an expensive chandelier hanging over it. To be honest, he simply wanted to do something better than staring at unnecessary expenses. I don't have a library yet, but if you tell me what you want to read then I will get them for you, Sirius suggested with a hint of nervousness. Now that Harry mentioned it, Sirius remembered that Harry had told him that he loved reading, but it kind of left his mind. For his sake, I hope he hasn't burnt down the Black Library, Lily growled angrily inside Harry's mind. What about the Black Library? Harry asked as he stared straight into Sirius' eyes. Sirius didn't know why, but he felt like he was being stared at by a predator. Why do you want to read something from the Black Library? That place is filled with dark books, Sirius asked in a bewildered tone. Well, I wanted to see if I could find anything useful in those books or not, Harry answered, looking completely unconcerned. From what I remember, there had been quite a few blacks who were feared in the dueling circuits, so I wanted to see if they had left any knowledge behind," Harry explained calmly. He could have forced Sirius to show him the Black Library, it would have been too easy for him, considering his power, but he decided to play it nice for the time being as the man might run off to Dumbledore. Harry wasn't ready to fight a three-way war. This also made him realize that he needed to learn legilimency as quickly as he could. It would be an extremely useful addition to his already impressive arsenal. Ah! You should have said that from the beginning. Sirius sighed in relief and started to grin. Wait, I will ask Doxy to get the books for you, Sirius said, and as soon as he finished speaking, a house elf appeared in front of him with a pop, making Sirius jump back in fright. Gah! How many times have I told you not to do that? Sirius exclaimed while pointing his finger at the house elf, but it was clear that Sirius wasn't actually angry. The house elf didn't seem to be bothered by Sirius' words. What can Doxy best doing for Master Padfoot? The house elf asked, completely ignoring Sirius' rant. Sirius sighed in defeat. He could swear that the house elf was getting back at him for messing up the house from time to time. You see, my godson wants some dueling books from the Black Library, can you get them for him? Sirius asked, looking somewhat tired. Of course, Doxy best doing that. Doxy said just before she snapped her fingers and disappeared. You have an interesting house elf, Sirius, Harry pointed out in an amused tone as he knew very well how tiring an excitable house elf can be. You can say that, Sirius muttered in defeat. So, why don't we sit down and have a chat? Sirius suggested, and all three of them agreed as they didn't have anything better to do. So, Sirius started to lead them toward the massive drawing room. On the way to the drawing room, Sirius turned toward Jacqueline and Brittany and started to speak. Harry says that the two of you are his only friends, so the two of you know a lot about him, don't you? Sirius asked with a mischievous glint in his eyes. Yeah, we do, Jacqueline admitted with a nod of her head, but that didn't mean that she was going to tell him everything about Harry. She wasn't going to betray Harry like that. Meanwhile, Brittany wasn't as smooth as Jacqueline, so she froze at first, but she still nodded her head in agreement when she noticed that Jacqueline didn't seem to be worried in the slightest. All right. So, can you guys tell me if Harry has a crush on someone? Sirius asked as he worked his eyebrows with a goofy grin on his face, making Harry groan. Whatever he was expecting, he wasn't expecting him to ask this question. That was why he didn't react when Sirius asked Jacqueline and Brittany if they knew a lot about him. He trusted both Jacqueline and Brittany, so he knew that they wouldn't give away his secrets in the first place. Hearing Sirius' question, Jacqueline and Brittany looked at each other before both of them burst out laughing. While Harry threw them a dirty look, Sirius simply blinked in confusion. He started to wonder if he accidentally cracked a joke. From Harry himself, he already knew that his godson wasn't into the dating game, but he wasn't expecting it to be this bad. Pfft! I don't believe he even has the time to ogle anyone, much less have a crush on someone, Brittany wheezed out in between her laughs. Brittany rarely broke out of her usual stiff personality, but it usually happened whenever she found something extremely funny. What she said? Jacqueline breathed out with some difficulties while holding her sides as her stomach started to ache for laughing too hard. Thank you for you being such awesome friends, guys, Harry bit out in a bland tone. The sarcasm in his voice was so thick that it could probably cut through steel. Is he really that bad? Sirius asked in a horrified tone, only for Jacqueline and Brittany to nod their heads in agreement. The two of them completely ignored Harry's sarcastic jab. Though unknown to all three of them, Harry not only had a crush on someone, but he was also in a relationship with the same woman. No. He can't be that bad. Maybe he is just shy. Yeah. That's it. Maybe, I should give him a helping hand like a dutiful godfather should. Avila should be perfect. After all, only the best for my godson. Sirius nodded his head sagely as he came up with the most convenient conclusion from his perspective inside his mind. So, what does he do when he is free? Sirius asked, trying to know more about his godson from his friends. He reads and trains, day. Jacqueline answered with a shrug, looking like she was stating the most obvious fact in the world, making Sirius gasp in horror. Sirius immediately realized that his godson needed to let loose and have some fun. Chapter 86, The Godfather Most Extraordinaire, 2. Luton, London. Harry, this is my favorite cousin, Andromeda Tonks, and this is her husband, Theodore Tonks. Sirius introduced Andromeda and her husband to Harry, who joined them for breakfast as all of them were going to take a portkaya to the Quidditch World Stadium from here in 2 hours. Hello, nice to meet you too, I am Harry Potter. Harry politely introduced himself before he took Andromeda's hand and brushed his lips over the back of her palm, making her smile at him appreciatively. After letting go of her hand, he extended his hand toward her husband for a handshake. The man accepted his offered hand and shook it. It's nice to meet you too, young man. We have heard a lot about you from Sirius, Theodore said with a smile as he finally released Harry's hand. Only good things I hope, Harry said with a smile. No, not exactly. He had been continuously whining about how you aren't a prankster like him or how you aren't a ladies' man like him, Andromeda commented offhandedly, making Harry turn toward Sirius and give him a bland look. Lies. Sirius gasped, looking aghast. How can you accuse me of such horrible things, cousin? I thought you loved me, Sirius complained, looking like a child, making Andromeda giggle. Come on, cousin. You need to live up to your mistakes. You simply can't take them back, Andromeda stated firmly, but she couldn't hide the mirth in her eyes. It's all right, Sirius. I can already see you doing that and I don't mind since it's the truth, Harry shrugged dismissively. Thanks to his newfound powers, he was easily able to get a read on his godfather and he already knew quite well what type of a man his godfather was. Unfortunately or fortunately, Sirius wasn't serious in the slightest. God damn it, Andy. You are turning my godson against me. Sirius accused the woman while pointing a finger at her and the woman simply scoffed at his accusation. I did no such thing. I only told him the truth and it seems he is a smart boy, he already knew that I was telling the truth, Andromeda huffed haughtily. Are they always like that, Mr. Tonks? Harry asked Theodore, who was simply watching the conversation unfold warily. Yes, you can say that and please call me Ted, the man offered, making Harry nod his head in understanding. Then please call me Harry, Harry offered in return. All right, Harry. By the way, I think it would be best if I put an end to this before it could escalate into something more, Ted sighed. Ahem, I think we should get moving or we will miss our portkaya. The man fake coughed in his hand to get everyone's attention before he spoke. You are right, husband. Andromeda nodded her head in understanding as she decided to end the conversation then and there. Oh, and Harry, please call me Andy, we are practically family, the woman said with a soft smile as she ruffled his hair. All right, Andy. By the way, where is Tonks? Harry asked, making Andy raise her eyebrows before a growl escaped her lips. I don't know why she hates her name so much. Andy shook her head in disappointment, but Harry still sympathized with Tonks when it came to her name. She will join us in the evening after her shift is over, Andy answered his question after a moment as the smile returned to her face. Oh, Harry muttered as he nodded his head in understanding. He was planning to make Jacqueline ask Tonks for a duel. Tonks was trained by Alastair Moody, the second strongest combatant in the order just after Dumbledore, and he wanted to see if she was really good or not. Both Jacqueline and Tonks might be the same in age, but the two of them were quite different when it came to their combat capabilities. Jacqueline is a duelist whereas Tonks is an orator. A duel between the two of them is bound to be interesting and he would also get to learn a lot of stuff by simply watching Tonks in action. Yet, the food will also get cold and we can't have that, Sirius pointed out with a grin as he started to lead Andromeda and Theodore toward the dining hall while Harry decided to make his way toward the first floor to inform Jacqueline and Brittany about breakfast, as the two of them were still in their rooms. Dartmoor, England. Harry, Jacqueline, Brittany, Sirius, Andromeda, and Theodore dropped from the sky and landed on their feet. Sirius stumbled a bit, but he quickly caught himself. Harry and the entourage looked around only to find several people standing around the clearing with notepads in their hands and a lot of big tents erected at some distance. One of the men stepped forward in their direction. Name please, the man called out as he continued to approach them. I have made a reservation under the name of Sirius Black, Sirius called out primly as he smoothed his robes as his robes were ruffled a bit thanks to the portkaya they took. Ah! I have you here. I will ask someone to show you the spot, the man said with a smile and signaled one of the people standing at the edges of the clearing. The man nodded his head in understanding and stepped forward. Oh, by the way, one of my family members, Nymphadora Tonks, will be arriving in the evening, please show her the spot, and two of my friends will arrive on the 18th, they will be needing your guidance too, Sirius explained before the man could start to lead them toward the campsite. The first man nodded his head in understanding as he pulled out a quill and wrote down something in his notepad. Brittany's parents decided to join them on the 18th as they didn't have any plans of attending the Quidditch World Cup in the first place, but at the same time, they thought it might be rude to ignore the invitation, especially when their daughter was going, and decided to clear their schedule for 18th and 19th. The group finally arrived in front of a clearing. This is the spot, Mr. Black, just as you requested. Enjoy your stay. The man said with a meaningful look on his face as he pointed at the plot. The man looked at their group and his gaze stopped at Harry. He noticed the gaze and thought the man might say something, but the man quickly scurried off without saying anything. He felt it to be a bit weird, but he decided not to say anything. What do you think, Harry? Isn't this a nice spot? Sirius asked while grinning widely. Is it just me or our spot is near the tent of Bulgarian Vila Mascots? Andromeda asked with a scowl. It was a rhetorical question as she already knew the answer. Pfft. Sirius waved his hand dismissively. I am sure it was a coincidence. Sirius denied the accusation, looking completely innocent, but nobody believed his act. It's good to see that some things never change. He still thinks with his dick. Lily grumbled unhappily. Don't worry, Hadrian. They aren't anything special. Their allure makes them look better, Lily immediately pointed out as she wanted to make sure that her baby boy didn't get involved with those feathery harlots. They can turn into birds and throw fireballs, Harry pointed out in an amused tone as he realized what his mom was trying to do. Not that he was planning to get involved with Avila in the first place. After all, he was already in a relationship with the most beautiful woman. Harry, they are Vila, Andy said while pointing at some blonde-haired women at some distance. They have this aura called allure. The allure is like a confundus charm, it makes them incredibly appealing and it can also enthrall men, Andy explained with a stern look on her face as she threw Sirius a dirty look. I know. I have read about them, but I didn't know their allure would be this strong. I can feel it from here, Harry said, looking a bit nervous, but in reality, he wasn't feeling anything. He could feel something brushing against his mental barriers, but that was it. Alas, he didn't want to reveal any of his cards as he wasn't sure if either Sirius or the Elder Tonks were in Dumbledore's pocket. Don't worry, Harry. It is all right to feel like that. I am also feeling their allure, but as long as you stay away from them, everything will be all right. Ted comforted Harry while patting his back. Can we already set up the tent? We can always tear strips out of him afterward, Jacqueline suggested with an annoyed look on her face as she jabbed her finger at Sirius, who was looking a bit nervous with all the glares pointed in his direction. He wasn't expecting anyone to catch on to his plans so quickly, but he realized that Andy knew him too well to be fooled by such an act of innocence. That is a good idea, Andy nodded her head in agreement as she continued to glare at Sirius. I am sure that Sirius could take care of that on his own, can't you? Andy asked sweetly, but Sirius felt chills run down his spine. Why yes, of course. It isn't that hard, Sirius stuttered out. Brilliant. Andy cheered. Now that Sirius had agreed to set up the tent on his own, why don't we go around to check all the facilities? Andy suggested, getting everyone's approval. Sirius would have liked to deny it, but he knew that he didn't have a choice but to agree with her. Chapter 87, The Duel They Fought. Tonks peeked through the flaps of the tent to check if this was the right tent or not, but as soon as she found her mum and dad sitting with Harry and a few others at the center, she knew that this was the right tent. Watcher, guys! Dora exclaimed loudly as she entered the tent by moving the flaps aside. Nymphadora, it's bad manners to peek inside someone's tent, Andy chastised her daughter. Tonks felt her temper flare while a blush crept on her face due to the embarrassment. Don't call me that! She snapped, purely on instinct. I don't understand why you hate your name. It's such a beautiful name, Andy huffed as she scowled at her daughter's antics. What do you think, Harry? Andy asked as she turned toward Harry. Tonks, who was about to come up with a snarky retort, tripped on the mat and fell flat on her face, earning some chuckles from the occupants and a disappointed sigh from her mum. Her face burned in embarrassment as she slowly pushed herself off the floor. This was so not cool. She brushed her robes while trying to avoid everyone's gaze. Please don't drag me into this, Andy. Harry decided that it would be best if he didn't get himself involved in this argument even though he was with Tonks on this. Tonks finally arrived at the table while staring down at her feet and plopped down beside her dad with a grumpy look on her face. By the way, Tonks, are you all right? Harry asked with a look of concern. Everything besides my dignity is all right, Tonks mumbled unhappily as she started to pout childishly. Here, why don't you have some cola? Harry offered as he flicked his wand while mumbling Oxio under his breath to summon a cola bottle from the icebox. Thanks, Harry. Tonks beamed at him as she grabbed the bottle from the air. At least there is someone who cares about me, Tonks muttered petulantly as she glanced at her parents from the corner of her eyes. When are you going to grow up, Nymphadora? Andy sighed in defeat while shaking her head. Bah! He only gave her cola and she is already putting him before us. Ted exclaimed in exasperation, but he couldn't hide the amusement in his voice. Should I be worried, Dora? Ted asked, making Tonks sputter as she knocked over the cola bottle, but surprisingly, the liquid didn't spill out of the bottle. It looked like an invisible barrier was stopping the liquid from coming out. How did you do that? Andy asked Harry with a gasp. It's a spell I found in a childcare book, Harry answered with a smile, and Tonks picked up her cola bottle with a fascinated look on her face. Why the hell were you even reading a childcare book in the first place? Jacqueline asked in a bewildered tone. I was looking for a spell that could soften any surface, Harry answered with a shrug. Harry, you gotta teach me this spell. This spell will be so handy. Tonks practically begged as she used her powers to make her eyes look a bit bigger for greater effect. If only I knew this spell, then my life would have been so easier, Andy muttered with a scowl as she also decided to learn the spell. By the way, Tonks, these two are my best friends. This is Jacqueline Harper, and this is Brittany Lawrence. Harry introduced his friends to Tonks. Watch her, guys. Tonks waved at the two of them with a smile on her face. By the way, I am Tonks, Tonks said with a hard look on her face. No problem, Tonks. Jacqueline smiled back at Tonks. Harry told me that you are a trainee or care for a duel? Jacqueline asked with a challenging grin on her face. Tonks slammed her fist on the table and grinned back at Jacqueline. You are on! Tonks exclaimed as she started to stand up, but her dad grabbed her hand and pulled her down. What's wrong, Dad? Tonks asked with a whine. I don't think the management will appreciate it if all of a sudden, spells started to fly true, Ted explained a bit warily. Let them be. Andy waved her hand dismissively. Unlike her husband, who didn't like fighting at all, she liked watching wizarding duels. The Blacks during her time may not have been involved in the dueling circuits, but they dueled amongst themselves quite regularly. She had heard from Harry that the girl had claimed the third position in the under-17 tournament, so she wanted to see how the girl was going to fare against her own daughter, who was training under Alastair Mad-Eye Moody. I don't think anyone is going to complain if they fight in here. As long as they don't use any flame spells, it would be alright, Andy explained with a shrug. Are you sure? Ted asked, still looking somewhat concerned. Come on, Dad. Don't be a stick in the mud. It will be alright. We will be careful, Tonks promised, making Ted give her a skeptical look. It was simply impossible for his daughter and careful to go hand in hand, and Tonks looked almost offended at the look her dad was giving her. By the way, where is Sirius? I don't see him anywhere, Tonks mumbled while looking around. If Sirius gave them permission to duel, then her dad won't be able to protest anymore, and from what she knew about Sirius, he would happily give them his blessings. He went out to get some food and we decided to have some takeout today, Andy answered before anyone else could say anything. The man obviously didn't want to go, but he didn't have much choice in the matter. Weren't we planning to cook here? Tonks asked as she inclined her head in confusion. Yes, but he said that we should simply relax and have some rest tonight, Andy chuckled softly, making Tonks look even more confused as Sirius was the one who seemed to be the most excited about cooking food. Tonks opened her mouth to say something, but the words got caught in her mouth when a look of realization finally dawned on her face. Does this have something to do with the fact that our tent is near the tent of the Bulgarian Vila Mascots? Tonks asked unsurely, but instead of answering, Andy simply smiled at her daughter proudly. Tonks turned toward her dad for an answer, but he simply coughed in his hand and decided to avoid her gaze, but Tonks already had her answer. Well, that's just like Sirius, Tonks stated with an obvious look on her face. Oh. I forgot to ask, are you alright, Harry? Tonks asked in a concerned tone. Even here I can feel their allure, but I can handle it, Harry answered with a proud smile on his face. That's great, kiddo, Tonks cheered and raised her hand in the air as she leaned toward Harry. It took Harry a moment to realize what she wanted, and when he did, he also raised his hand in the air and high-fived her. Now she is more worried about a kid she met a few days ago than her own father, Ted sighed with a look of mock horror on his face, making Tonks roll her eyes at him. Mum will take care of you if you end up stepping out of line, Tonks retorted with an amused grin on her face. Ted shivered a bit when Andy placed her hand over his arm and smiled sweetly at him. Well, I guess we can have the duel when Sirius finally returns, Jacqueline muttered as she nodded her head. Ha! Guys, I am finally back! Sirius exclaimed tiredly as he finally entered the tent. He found everyone including Tonks sitting at the center table. Tonksy, I am glad you are finally here. Your mum has been bullying poor Padfoot, save me from her tyranny. Sirius exclaimed dramatically as he made his way toward the table. I don't want to get bullied too, so you are on your own, old dog, Tonks said coldly as she decided to throw him to the wolves. You traitor! Sirius exclaimed in mock outrage. He finally arrived in front of the table and slumped down beside Harry as he placed the food on the table. So, what's up, guys, did you miss me? Sirius asked as he looked around. Not much, Harry muttered unhappily, and Sirius gasped as he placed his hands over his heart, looking hurt. By the way, Jacqueline and Tonks want to have a duel, do you think it will be alright if they do it in here? Harry asked in a hopeful tone as he wanted Sirius to agree or he would have to wait longer for the duel. Sirius seemed to think for a bit before he finally nodded his head. It is fine if they have a duel in here, but no fire spells, and we will also need to clear the space a bit, Sirius said thoughtfully. All right, I will help, Harry said as he stood up and pulled out his wand. I will help too, Brittany also stood up following Harry's example. There will be no need for that, Harry, Brittany. The two of you just sit here, we will take care of it, Andy said as she gestured the two of them to sit down. Harry and Brittany glanced at each other before they shrugged and decided to follow Andy's suggestion. It only took Sirius, Ted, and Andy a couple of minutes to clear the space for the duel. That should do it, Sirius said while looking around as he dusted off his hands. What do you guys think? He turned toward the stars of the show and asked. It's a bit small, but it will do, Tonks said while nodding her head. Mad Eye had trained her to fight in cramped spaces, but fighting and dueling are quite different from each other even though they might sound the same. It's adequate, Jacqueline mumbled as she nodded her head. Now, we will need someone to officiate the duel, Jacqueline said as she looked around. I will do it, Sirius blurted out excitedly as he stepped forward. Are you sure? Andy asked with a hint of concern in her voice, but Sirius simply dismissed her concerns with a grin. He may have been incarcerated in prison for more than a decade, but some things were so deeply ingrained in his mind that he could never forget them. All right. The two of you take a corner, Sirius said as he pointed at the two corners. Jacqueline took one while Tonks took the other side. Flame spells have been barred. If you use them once, you get a warning, and if you do it again, you will be disqualified. This isn't a formal duel, but we will still follow some of the basic rules. No lethal spells, and the victor will be decided when the opponent is disarmed, incapacitated, or knocked out. Do you understand? Sirius asked as he intently stared at Jacqueline and Tonks. When the two of them finally nodded their heads in understanding, Sirius decided to continue. First, you bow. Sirius said, and Jacqueline bowed with practiced ease, but Tonks bowed clumsily as she didn't have any experience with formal duels. The only thing she knew was fighting. All right then. Start! Sirius exclaimed as he brought down his hand in a downward motion, and that was the signal the duo were waiting for. Both of them fired their first spell at the same time. The spells clashed in midair and a few sparks flew before the spells disappeared, but neither Jacqueline nor Tonks were paying attention to that as the two of them were busy flinging spells at each other. Both of them were moving with extreme finesse, but it was clear that Tonks was not a duelist. Jacqueline's assault was much more focused and concentrated while Tonks' assault was brutal and efficient. It seemed like Jacqueline was performing a well-rehearsed dance while Tonks seemed to be much rougher, though Harry could clearly see that Tonks was the most dangerous one between the two. Her movements might look wide-drawn, but she was trained in such a manner to take on multiple opponents. Harry could clearly see the brutality and ruthlessness in her moves. If this wasn't a duel, then Harry was sure that Tonks would have been either fighting to maim or kill. There was this dangerous glint in her eyes. The gaze of a predator. Even though Tonks was being pushed back, her posture didn't falter, instead, her techniques started to become more brutal. She unconsciously started to aim for Jacqueline's head and neck. Sirius gulped nervously when he noticed the change, but he decided not to interrupt as Jacqueline didn't seem to be bothered in the slightest by the spells Tonks was casting at her. I admit, you are good. If this was a fight then I would have been having a much harder time, Jacqueline said with a grin as continued to push back Tonks. You talk too much. Tonks snarled as she cast Oxio on Jacqueline's shoes, but she was taken aback when nothing happened. She looked down to see her hand, only to find that her wand was missing. Her head whipped toward Jacqueline, who was holding her wand with a playful grin on her face. I baited you. I knew you would try to attack me as soon as I finished talking, and I knew that there would be a small window for me to disarm you just before you attack me. I simply used that window to disarm you, Jacqueline said with a grin, and Tonks growled unhappily, but her shoulders slumped down in defeat. No need to feel bad. I was the best under 17 duelist in my country, and as I said before, if this was a fight then I would have been having a much harder fight. Jacqueline comforted Tonks. I don't think I need to declare the victor, but just for the sake of formalities, here goes. The victor is Jacqueline Harper. Sirius exclaimed with a conflicted look on his face as he was cheering for Tonks. Thanks, Tonks mumbled as she accepted her wand from Jacqueline, who held it out for her. It was an amazing duel, Nymphadora. I am quite proud of you. I pity whoever stands on the opposite side of your wand. Andy praised her daughter as she pulled the girl into her arms in a comforting manner. From now on, I will be careful to not get on your bad side, Ted mumbled as he stared at Tonks warily. Yet. Tell me about it. If I knew that she was this dangerous with a wand then I would have never made fun of her, Sirius mumbled fearfully. Yes, you better be afraid of me, you old dog, Tonks huffed haughtily as she flicked her purple hair behind her shoulder. Though I think you guys are praising me too much. She is the one who won, Tonks sighed as she jerked her thumb toward Jacqueline, who was talking with Harry and Brittany with a grin on her face. Chapter 88, The World Cup Most Special, 3. Dartmoor, England, August 18, 1994. Harry, who was lying on the floor with a book in his hands, sat up and closed the book when he sensed Tonks approaching his room. It has been a day since the duel, and since then he had been constantly analyzing the movements and techniques Tonks used inside his head. Even though his mind palace was still a work in progress, his mind palace was already much better than any other orthodox mind palaces. Thanks to his beyond genius level intellect, he was able to run battle simulations right inside his mind. Since yesterday he had been constantly fighting against an avatar of Tonks, and he didn't stop her from using lethal moves or spells during the simulations. Even the unforgivables were no exception, while he decided not to use mystic arts as he wanted to see where he stood against a highly trained witch without mystic arts. The first couple of times he fought her avatar, he got his ass handed to him, but since the fourth simulation, he had been maintaining a winning streak. He knew that her avatar wasn't perfect as he didn't know what Tonks was truly capable of, but he was confident that he could defeat her in real life, even though she probably had several tricks up her sleeves. Her fighting style was much more suited toward fighting multiple enemies at the same time, and he was quite glad that he came up with the idea of the duel in the first place. While he was sure that he could defeat Tonks, he wasn't sure how he was going to fare against her teacher, as he never saw the man fight. Tonks finally arrived in front of the door, but before she could knock on the door, Harry decided to speak up. Is there something I can help you with, Tonks? Harry asked, making Tonks jump back in fear as she adopted a karate stance, but instead of imposing, she was looking hilarious. How the fuck? Tonks blurted out from the other side of the door. I heard someone tripping, and there is no one who is as clumsy as you, Harry explained in an amused tone as he flicked his wand in the air to open the door. Emotional damage. Tonks howled inside her mind as she felt an invisible arrow pierce through her chest at his words. You know, all of you are really ruthless. At this rate, I might die before I could even get married, Tonks whined as her lips trembled and she used her powers to make her eyes look bigger, which were pooling with unshed tears. Nah. You will be all right. Your mum said you have very thick skin, Harry retorted cheerfully, making Tonks growl in anger as she started to shoot stinging hexes at Harry. He easily danced through the spells with extreme ease, making Tonks blink in confusion. How did you do that? Tonks asked in a bewildered tone. I am a duelist too, remember? Harry asked while pointing at himself. The first thing I learned is to dodge spells, and my small stature makes it easy for me to dodge spells, Harry explained with a smile. I see. Tonks mumbled with a thoughtful look on her face. Oh, I am going out, wanna come? You can invite Jackie and Brittany too. Tonks finally revealed why she was here in the first place. Yeah, sure. Just wait a sec, Harry said as he flicked his wand over his head, summoning his outer robes and gloves from the coat stand. The weather in England was bloody awful. So, where are we going? Harry asked as he smoothed his outer robes after putting them on. They said that there was going to be a fair. I wanted to check it out, Tonks answered as Harry finally came out of his room and closed the door behind him. You go and get Jackie, I will grab Brittany, Harry said, and Tonks started to walk away after giving him a nod. The tent was massive from the inside, so everyone had their own rooms except for Andy and Ted, as they were already a couple. A couple of hours later. You sure you will be able to eat all of that? Jacqueline asked, looking a bit worried for Tonks when she saw how much food Tonks was carrying. Mah. Nothing to worry about. This much is nothing to me, Tonks sniffed proudly. I bought some for you guys too, Tonks said as she started to share the food with others too. Right now, they were returning from the fair, so there wasn't much crowd around them. Whoa! Do you see that, brother? The boy who lived already has a harem. A voice exclaimed from the side. Yes, brother mine. I think he has the magic. Another voice agreed in a similar tone. The whole group stopped and turned toward the source of the voices, only to find two older redheads grinning at them. The duo were practically identical, so Harry easily guessed that they were twins. Who the fuck are you clowns? Jacqueline asked threateningly, but the duo simply looked at each other and grinned comically. You see that, brother dear, she has claws. One of them cooed, making the other one laugh too. Jacqueline growled and whipped out her wand to curse the duo, only for them to change their tunes in an instant as they raised their hands in the air. It was the sign of universal surrender, so Jacqueline slightly lowered her wand. Wait! Wait! Don't curse them! Tonks exclaimed as the situation escalated out of the blue. It was a good thing that Jacqueline didn't curse them, or they would be in a heap of trouble. Well, it wouldn't matter much, as Sirius would be able to get off any charges as long as it wasn't murder, but she was an Auror. Yet, she was still a trainee, but that was beside the point. By the way, don't you two know not to pass comments at strangers? Tonks asked the pair of twins, who simply shrugged. Freckles, and red hair. Let me guess, Weasleys. Tonks bit out as she nodded her head. She didn't know much about the Weasleys except for what she had seen in Charlie, who was her year mate. Ah! You know us? One of the twins asked, looking impressed. Unfortunately, Tonks groaned bitterly as her experience with Charlie wasn't that good. The two of them were dating in their 6th year, but after some time, she realized that Charlie couldn't get it up until she wasn't sporting scales on her body. It was bloody revolting. Thankfully, she discovered his nauseating fetishes before doing the deed. She was so mortified by the whole experience, and she never tried to date anyone else from school after Charlie. Oh! You don't seem to be thrilled. By the way, I am Fred, and this is George. He is the uglier one. One of the twins introduced himself, and the other cuffed him at the back of his head when Fred called him ugly. It was nice meeting you, Fred and George, but I am afraid that we must get going, Harry said politely as he tried to leave, as he could sense someone watching him. The gaze he was feeling was not from a human, but from an insect, which was weird until he realized that the insect was probably an animagus. The insect was watching him from one of the trees on their right. Fred, George, Mum has been looking for you and she is quite mad, they heard another voice as another redhead showed up near them. This redhead was probably somewhere around Tonks' age, and when their eyes met, the man's eyes grew wide in shock. Oh shite! The man cursed. Fuck me sideways. At the same time, Tonks mumbled under her breath. You know him? Harry asked, only for Tonks to unconsciously nod her head. Whoa, Dad, it looks like Charlie found his ex. Two more redheads appeared near them, and one of them was a bit more older than Charlie, probably his older brother or something, and the other one was significantly older than the others. The other redhead called him a father, so the man was probably the father of all these children. Harry groaned internally as the redheads kept showing up, and his annoyance increased several folds when his mom told him that the man's name was Arthur Weasley and the Weasleys worshipped the ground. Albus Dumbledore walked on. Motherfucker! How many of them are there? Harry cursed inside his mind as he could already count 4 children. I think there are 3 more. One is in your age group, and Molly was pregnant with another when I last saw her. I never understood why they decided to have so many children when they are dirt poor, Lily answered with a grimace, making Harry cringe internally. Maybe they never heard about contraceptive charms, or they consider contraceptive charms to be the work of the devil, Harry concluded. Kenneth, Bill. Tonks snapped at the oldest brother when he called her Charlie's ex. Don't think I won't curse you, Tonks threatened menacingly while glaring at him. The man simply scratched his cheek as he chuckled sheepishly. The man was wearing a fanged earring and his red hair was tied in a ponytail. Harry had to admit, the earring looked cool. Don't you dare, Hadrian, Lily warned Harry. Though if you want, you can wear something more subtle, Lily compromised when she realized that her Hadrian wouldn't look bad with an earring. I don't know what they had done, but I apologize for them. Arthur Weasley stepped forward. How about we calm down and have some tea? It's clear that my son knows you, but I don't know who you are, the man offered with a smile. Ah, Dad! That's great! We are sure that you don't recognize him, but he is Harry, Harry Potter. One of the twins exclaimed cheerfully, and everyone's eyes focused on Harry, making him groan again. Chapter 89, The World Cup Most Special, 4. Is that really you? Arthur asked, looking joyful and conflicted at the same time. The man stepped forward with a delighted look on his face to take a good look at Harry, but all of a sudden, the man faltered and gave him a solemn look. For whatever it's worth, I am sorry, young man. I couldn't help any more. Maybe, I could have done something more. I should have done something, the man breathed out with a shudder. What the fuck are you talking about? Harry and Lily both wondered at the same time. I have no idea why you are apologizing to me in the first place. For Merlin's sake, I don't even know who you are, Harry blurted out, looking confused and somewhat afraid. Jacqueline, who was watching from the side, barely herself back, calling out Harry for his acting. She had to admit, Harry was really good at acting. If she didn't know his real personality, then she would have believed that he was really confused and afraid. From the corner of her eyes, she noticed Brittany was looking like she had completely lost the plot. Jacqueline moved her hand to grab her arm, and Brittany, who was trying to make any sense of the whole situation, whipped her head toward Jacqueline. The older girl simply shook her head subtly. Brittany frowned and pursed her lips, but decided to hold her questions until later. She didn't know why Harry was acting like that, but she realized that he must have a very good reason behind his actions. With a frown on her face, she gave Jacqueline a subtle nod before she turned back toward Harry. Sometimes, she couldn't understand either of her best friends. I am sorry. I am Arthur Weasley, the man sighed sheepishly before introducing himself. I don't know how much Albus or Sirius have told you, but I knew your parents before they. The man trailed off with a somewhat guilty look on his face for bringing up his parents. We weren't that close, but we would have loved to take care of you. The man frantically stumbled with his words. It's all right, Mr. Weasley. Thank you for your kind words, Mr. Weasley, and you shouldn't feel bad. Headmaster Dumbledore had explained why it wasn't safe for me to stay in this country. Harry finally lost the look of fear from his face and started to speak somewhat meekly. In the last 2 days, Harry had learned why everyone was thinking that he was sent to the States by Dumbledore, and he didn't have any problems using the same excuse. Thank you for understanding, young man, Arthur sighed in relief as the jovial smile returned to his face. While Arthur was talking with Harry, the other Weasleys were simply watching the interaction in complete silence, except for William Weasley. He couldn't place his finger on it, but something about the whole interaction felt weird. Even though Harry was clearly confused and afraid, something felt amiss as the ones accompanying him didn't look worried. Yes, they were frowning or scowling, but they didn't look worried in the slightest. That is why I was apologizing. Only if we could have punished the Death Eaters, then you wouldn't have to leave your homeland. Arthur shook his head, looking angry at himself. It's all right, Mr. Weasley. I don't blame any of you. I blame the ones who were running the administration. Harry waved off the man's apology while shifting uncomfortably on his feet. You are more understanding than my youngest son, Arthur mumbled with a smile. How about we take this conversation somewhere else? He suggested, hoping to talk more with Harry, but after hearing his words, Harry frowned. I am sorry, Mr. Weasley, but it's about time we should get going. My godfather is probably getting really worried for me, Harry said, looking almost apologetic. I see. Then I won't keep you any longer. Take care, young man, Arthur sighed in disappointment, but he didn't look like he was offended. He happily bid Harry farewell with a smile on his face. Boys, let's head back. Your mother would be really worried, the man said as he started to head in the opposite direction with his kids. I can't wait to tell Ronnykins and Ginny that we met Harry Potter. One of the twins exclaimed while following Arthur. The other twin nodded his head in understanding as exclaimed in agreement. Quite an interesting bunch, wouldn't you agree, Tonks? Harry asked, shrugging off his act. Shut the fuck up. Tonks gasped in shock. I can't believe you did that. That was hilarious. Tonks wheezed out, barely holding back her laughter. Tonks did have some questions, but she decided that her questions could wait as Jacqueline and Brittany were still here. I am glad you appreciate. Harry smiled back at her as the group finally started to move again. I realized that you were feeling uncomfortable around them and I simply couldn't bring myself to accept the invitation from a complete stranger. Harry breathed out as he forced himself to shudder. Yet, I can understand where you are coming from. From what my mum has told me, Molly Weasley is an extremely overbearing woman, who would try to mother anyone. Tonks spit out with a sigh. I am glad that you didn't accept the offer, especially with Sirius not here with us, Tonks added as she nodded her head, trying to sound serious, but she couldn't stop snickers from escaping her lips. As the group continued to head back toward their tent, Harry continued to monitor the bug following them for quite some time. He started to ponder how to deal with the bug. Should he let it be or should he capture it to extract information? Decisions, decisions. To be honest, he didn't like being watched by anyone else other than his mom, but that was beside the point. What are you planning to do, Hadrian? His mom asked him curiously. Moody and Tonks were one thing as Harry was still weak at that time, so couldn't have done anything to them in the first place, but that was no longer the case. Now, he had the power to fight back. I think I am going to deal with the annoyance. I don't want an animagus with unknown objectives trailing me 24/7, especially with the others around me, Harry answered after thinking for a bit. Having a bug animagus on the leash would be useful in the future, Harry wondered aloud inside his mind. Are you sure, Hadrian? Killing them, whoever it is, would be much easier, Lily pointed out with a scowl, but Harry internally shook his head. Killing is easy. If I can't salvage anything useful from the bug, then I could always go for the kill, Harry explained with a shrug. He might have killed the Dursleys, and he might have also indirectly killed one of his neighbors, but he didn't kill them just for the sake of killing. It felt good, but he didn't like the idea of killing random people, but he wouldn't mind killing them if there was no other choice. Lily huffed, but didn't argue anymore. The group finally entered the tent and found Sirius pacing around with a frown while Andy and Ted were sitting around the center table with tired looks on their faces. Sirius noticed their arrival and a look of relief washed over his face. Where the hell did you guys go? Sirius exclaimed frantically as he rushed toward Harry with a look of concern on his face. No need to get your tights in a wad, Sirius. I was there with him and I did tell you that I am taking him to the fair. Tonks rolled her eyes at him in exasperation. After hearing her words, Sirius froze for a second before nodding his head with an apologetic look on his face. Sorry for shouting. I simply got worried, Sirius sighed, looking uncomfortable. It's all right, Sirius. I don't mind. It's nice to have someone getting worried for me, Harry smiled at the man, making him flinch. There was a reason why he used that particular sentence, as he wanted to put an end to this conversation right here. Just as he expected, silence ensued, and everyone looked around uncomfortably before Tonks finally decided to break the silence. Guys, I brought food. Tonks exclaimed cheerfully as she gestured everyone to join her at the center table. Oh, by the way, we met the Weasleys on the way back, Tonks added. Andy, Ted, and Sirius raised their eyebrows at that. Soon, everyone joined Tonks at the center table before she started to recall everything that happened during their short trip. Half an hour later. It took all of them almost half an hour to finish their food, and after that, Harry excused himself, saying that he wanted to take a shower. Some of the others also excused themselves following his example. Tonks had to meet Alastair, so she left too, just like Andy decided to make some preparations for the barbecue they were going to have tonight. Jacqueline and Brittany decided to help her while Sirius and Ted decided to simply have a beer and relax. Meanwhile, Harry arrived inside his room, and after entering the bathroom, he locked it from inside before he finally started to open a portal. He had to admit, the bug was quite daring. The bug has dared to not only follow them inside the tent, but the bug has dared to follow him inside his room, but for whatever reason, the bug didn't follow him inside the bathroom. Well, not that it matters anymore. He was going to capture the bug and then, he was going to make it sing. With that thought inside his mind, he stepped into the portal. Chapter 90, The Little Beetle That Could, Harry stepped through the portal and arrived inside his apartment. He wasn't sure if he would be able to nail a small bug with stunning charm or not, so he decided to grab one of the empty potion vials he had in stock. Harry stopped in his tracks when he heard Hedwig hoot in anger at him from her perch. She was angry at him for leaving her here, but at the same time, she also refused to go inside a cage or his trunk for that matter. Oh! You don't get to take that tone with me. It was you who refused to go inside a cage or my trunk, and no matter what you believe, you can't fly to Britain, Harry pointed out with a condescending look on his face. Once again, Hedwig hooted at him in anger and Harry opened his mouth to say something, but he froze when he realized what he was doing and ran his fingers through his hair in frustration. Hedwig, I will talk with you later, I am in a hurry right now. Harry started to walk away as he waved his hand dismissively, but Hedwig wasn't going to have any of it. She preened her feathers in indignation and speared her wings to take flight. Harry obviously noticed what she was doing, but he didn't bother to pay her any mind as his feathery familiar came flying from behind and landed on his shoulder. She started to angrily nip at his ears, but Harry let her be. He simply raised his hand and started to stroke her, placating her quite a bit in one go. Harry finally arrived inside the storage room and started to rummage through the trunk where he kept the empty potion vials. He found one of the potion vials with the unbreakable enchantment, and that was exactly what he was looking for. He nodded his head in satisfaction before placing the vial inside one of his robe pockets, and he was about to start opening a portal when all of a sudden, Norton popped up. Master Hadrian already back? Norton wasn't expecting Master Hadrian to return so early. Norton chimed, looking excited about the fact that Harry was back. Sorry, Norton, I am not back yet. Something came up and I needed to grab an empty potion vial. I will be going back right now, Harry explained the situation, and Norton's ears dropped in disappointment after hearing his words. No need to feel bad, Norton, I will be back tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Harry tried to comfort Norton, and it worked when his ears perked up. Okay, Norton, then I will get going, Harry said as he started to open a portal inside the bathroom. Hedwig, will you mind getting off of me? Harry asked as he turned toward his shoulder where Hedwig was still perched. Harry could swear that she gave him an offended look before huffing and rolling her eyes at him. She chuffed at him with her wings before flying off from his shoulder. He looked at her while shaking his head for a few moments before he finally stepped through the portal, leaving Norton and Hedwig in his apartment. The portal closed behind his back and he cracked his neck before taking a deep breath. Good luck, Hadrian. His mom wished him luck just before he placed his hand on the door handle and slowly pushed it open, not wanting to scare off the bug. He walked out of the bathroom, and it was laughingly easy for him to locate the bug with his senses. The bug was watching him like a hawk from one of the art pieces hanging on the wall. Harry hummed nonchalantly as he made his way toward the enchanted window. It wasn't an actual window, but the spot was charmed to show the real-time view of outside the tent. For almost half a minute, Harry simply stared outside the window, but then all of a sudden, he raised his left hand and cast the stunning charm. The bug's eyes would have gone wide if it was possible, but unfortunately, the bug was so shocked by the sudden movement and the attack that it wasn't able to do anything until the red beam struck it. The bug fell down on the mat from the art piece without even a twitch. He walked up to the bug and cast another stunning charm at the bug, just in case the bug was playing possum. It never hurts to be too careful. He leaned down beside the bug and picked it up in his hand. He finally took a closer look at the bug and found that it was a blue water beetle with red markings like glasses around its eyes. Harry nodded his head in satisfaction and started to open another portal, but this one led to Jacqueline's backyard. Her backyard was a nice place to extract information as there was nothing around her house for miles. He stepped through the portal and dropped the water beetle on the ground. The portal closed behind his back and leaned down beside the water beetle and started to draw an intricate runic circle around the microscopic creature with the tip of his wand, but he kept the runic circle big enough to contain a human. The runic circle he was drawing was based on Anti-Animagus ward. He found the ward in one of the Potter family books. Originally, the ward was designed to prevent an animagus from entering a property and revert them into their human form before throwing them off, but after modifying the ward, instead of preventing an animagus from entering the property, it would prevent an animagus to a designated space, and it would also prevent the animagus from transforming back into their animal forms. When he finished drawing the runic circle, he started to pour his magic into the runic circle. Harry stepped into the runic circle and pointed one of his fingers at the water beetle and cast the animagus reversal spell. Unsurprisingly, the water beetle transformed into a woman. The woman had blonde hair, set in elaborate curls, oddly contrasting her heavily jawed face. Her spectacles were studded with jewels, and after a bit more inspection, Harry realized that her spectacles were decorated with rhinestones. He also noticed that the woman was sporting surprisingly long nails. His lips curled up in distaste as he started to cast diagnostic charms on her to check if she was carrying a weapon on her person besides her wand, but Harry wasn't impressed when he found that she was carrying her wand in her crocodile-skinned handbag. Stupid brainless bint, Harry cursed inside his head and tossed the handbag outside the runic circle. Yes, the woman could still summon her wand, but he wasn't expecting much from her, and it was also a test. He wanted to see if she could wandlessly summon her wand or not. After all, she had mastered the animagus transformation, which was probably the most complex branch of transfiguration. Since she wasn't concealing any more weapons on her person, Harry finally decided to wake her up. He snapped his fingers and the woman blinked as she sat up with a jolt. The woman raised her well-manicured eyebrows and frantically looked around, and she finally stopped moving, when she found Harry. A nasty smile, but at the same time, a sweet smile formed on her face. "You are in a lot of trouble. Attacking me and then kidnapping me? I have no idea how you did it, but if you don't let me go then you are going to be a heap of trouble, boy who lived or not, the woman said sweetly as she slowly pushed herself off the ground. Harry simply allowed her to speak for the time being, as there was always a chance that she might let something slip on her own. Do you know her, Mom? Harry asked as he continued to watch the woman carefully. He had to admit, the woman probably loved theatrics. Her magenta-colored robes were hurting his eyes, and the woman was also sporting 3 gold teeth. From what he had already seen, he was almost sure that the woman wasn't a hired wand, but he couldn't be sure. This might be her fake front. I don't believe I do, Lily answered after thinking for a bit. She guessed that the woman was probably in her 30s, but no matter how much Lily tried, she couldn't remember the woman from her memories. What is your name? Harry asked, not looking bothered in the slightest by her opening statements. The woman smiled at him sickly as she bared her 3 gold teeth to him. I am Rita Skeeter, you must have heard about me, the woman huffed haughtily with a smug glint in her eyes. Now do you finally understand that mistake you have made? If you let me go right now then I will look this over, the woman smiled sweetly, looking like she already won the argument. Even though Rita was acting haughtily, she was a bit worried on the inside. This was the first time someone captured her, but not only that, the person who captured her also knew about her most guarded secret. She knew that she was in a heap of trouble, but she would have been more worried if Harry Potter wasn't a child. That is why she was hoping to scare him with her words and escape. Never heard of you, Harry answered back with a bland look on his face, making the smile disappear from Rita's face. She realized that this was going to be much harder than she imagined as she barely held back her scathing retort. So, why were you watching me? Harry asked with a thoughtful look on his face. Rita blinked at his question before she finally burst out laughing. You are interrogating me? You are really interrogating me? This is hilarious. The woman continued to laugh roaringly. Chapter 91, The Little Beetle That Could, 2. Not only you attacked me and kidnapped me, but you are also trying to interrogate me. The woman wheezed out in between her laughs. It looks like all of that fame has gone into your head, the woman sneered as she finally stopped laughing. Previously, she was a bit worried, but now she was simply angry. If the boy thought that she was afraid of him then he had another thing coming. I see. It looks like I have to persuade you with some other means, Harry sighed as he shook his head in disappointment. He slowly pulled out his wand and he was intentionally slow with the draw. Rita pointed at his wand. What are you planning to do with that? Cast stinging hexes at me? The woman asked in a mocking tone as she reached out to smack Harry, but her whole body froze up and she realized she couldn't move. She stared at Harry with wide eyes when she realized that he petrified her without uttering a spell or moving his wand. Harry flicked his wand up in the air and levitated the woman up in the air. Rita screamed with her mouth closed as her whole body was petrified. Fear surged inside her mind as she started to sweat. Harry twisted his wand to cancel the petrification on her head. He wanted her to speak, so keeping her from speaking would be kind of counterproductive. He could have done all of this even without his wand, but he decided to keep that card close to his chest. Pa! Rita gasped when she realized that her head was no longer petrified. Even though she was afraid, she still decided to act strong. You don't want to do this, Harry. You have no idea who you are messing with. Rita screamed frantically, trying to scare Harry, but it didn't take her long to realize that it wasn't working when she saw that the expression on Harry's face didn't change in the slightest. I have friends, Rita began to speak, but she froze when pain surged from her left hand. Crack! Crack! Rita screamed loudly as she felt an intense amount of pain course through her body. Tears started to leak from the corner of her eyes. She finally started to get used to the pain and while breathing heavily, she slowly turned her head toward her left hand as she wanted to see the source of such mind-numbing pain. Her breath hitched in horror when she noticed that the pinky of her left hand was bent in a weird direction. Her head snapped back toward the boy. No, not a boy. A demon. The demon when he started to speak again. That's nice, Harry said thoughtfully. The expression on his face remained the same and now Rita was sure that she was dealing with a demon. Everyone should have friends, he admitted while nodding his head. With another twist of his wand, he petrified her head again, as he wanted to monologue like a villain. Rita started to hyperventilate in panic, but Harry paid her no mind. After a minute, she finally started to calm down when she noticed that he didn't snap any more of her fingers, and now that she was finally calm, Harry started to speak again as he wanted her to listen to everything he was saying. Sorry for that, but I needed you to understand that I am not fooling around. Pain is one of the greatest motivations, so Harry trailed off and pointed at her left hand. Now, I am going to free your head, but if you speak out of turn, then I will snap another of your fingers, Harry stated firmly. Rita noticed that the demon didn't even look like he was threatening her. He looked like he was stating facts, and that coldness scared her. She felt something warm trickle down her legs, but she didn't feel ashamed in the slightest. She was facing a demon, so she felt that losing control of her bladder was probably earned. For the time being, Rita decided to play along with him. That was probably the only way she could see this through alive. Harry twisted his hand a bit to unpetrify her head, and she gasped again at her minor freedom. Do you understand? Harry asked, and Rita frantically nodded her head. Once again, his expression didn't change. It felt like he was expecting her to nod her head like a good little girl. He didn't even show any reaction when she peed, so Rita realized that he probably decided to ignore it. She had never been humiliated in such a manner. It made her fume on the inside, but right now, she decided to suppress that part of her. Snapping at him right now would only earn her more pain. Yes, she might have decided to play along for now, but she internally vowed to destroy him as soon as she could. She promised herself that she would make him cry tears of blood. Nobody messed with Rita Skeeter and walked away with their reputation intact, and she was planning to do a lot more than butcher the boy who lived's reputation. Good. Harry nodded his head in satisfaction. You see, using legilimency on you would have been the easiest from my perspective, but fortunately for you, I don't know legilimency. Look it up if you have the chance, but I do not believe you will find anything about legilimency, Harry explained when he noticed her confusion at the term legilimency. Then I considered using the Cruciatus curse on you, but once again, I decided otherwise. The Cruciatus curse might be the best torture curse out there, but the signs are very easily noticed. So, I ultimately decided to take this route, which I could easily fix, and broken fingers are no big deal for me, Harry explained as once again he pointed toward her left hand. Now, this is how it will go. I will ask you a question and you will answer me truthfully, and you will answer me to the best of your capabilities. Understood? Harry asked as he stared directly into her eyes. The woman once again nodded her head. Yes, she might be planning her bloody vengeance, but that didn't mean that she wasn't afraid. If you say something I didn't want to hear, or if I feel like you are lying, then I will snap another one of your fingers. Do you understand? Harry asked again, and once again, Rita frantically nodded her head in understanding, as right now, that was the only thing she could do. Why were you following me? Harry asked, finally getting back to the topic. I was trying to look for a scoop. I was planning to find something scandalous about you and twist it into something more, Rita answered honestly. She didn't want to experience that pain for the second time. You are a reporter? Harry asked as he raised her eyebrows at her. He never bothered to read the British newspaper, so he never heard about Rita Skeeter. He would have felt bad for her, but the woman did admit that she was looking for something scandalous to ruin his name. Yes. Yes, I work for Daily Prophet, Rita admitted while nodding her head. What do you mean by twist it into something more? Harry asked, even though he already had a good idea. Rita seemed to hesitate a bit, but she still began to speak before Harry could snap another one of her fingers. Rita may not be the brightest tool in the shed, but she was more than smart enough to realize the trend. I spice up stories on my own to make them more phenomenal, Rita admitted with a small hint of pride in her voice. She had made a lot of enemies during all these years, but nobody succeeded to get back at her. Rita believed it was something to be proud of. Anyone who came after her, she ruined them too, and now Harry Potter was in her crosshairs. The boy was going to regret his actions. I see. I don't believe you have registered your animagus form, have you? Harry asked, even though once again he already knew that answer. Rita practically forced herself to answer this question. No, I am an unregistered animagus, Rita admitted, and it was almost painful for her to admit this. Ah. Then you must have used your form to spy on prominent figures in Wizarding Britain, haven't you? Harry asked. There was no way the woman wouldn't have done something like that. If he was in her place, then that is exactly what he would have done. This time Rita seemed to hesitate the most, and she screamed at the top of her lungs as Harry snapped another one of her fingers as promised. He never told her that he would snap her fingers if she took too much time to answer his questions, but some things were better to be left unsaid. Rita kept howling for the next couple of minutes as tears continued to roll down her cheeks. When she finally regained some semblance, she decided on the most foolish course of action. She tried to turn into her beetle form to escape. She knew she needed to escape. She couldn't simply hand over all the dirt she had collected during her career to a boy who was yet to grow any hair down there. The only reason nobody hired mercenaries to get rid of her was because of the dirt she had on them and their family members. She had made a lot of enemies by ruining their reputations, as her poison quill had ruined a lot of lives. The dirt she had on them and their families, which could see them into Azkaban, was her only life insurance. If she lost that, then death wasn't going to be the worst of her fates. That is why she tried to escape by turning into her beetle form, but unfortunately for her, she felt a jolt of pain in her chest as her transformation was forcefully stopped. It wasn't as painful as her broken fingers, but she still felt it. Her eyes focused on the demon standing in front of her with an amused smile on his face. He must have done something. She felt unimaginable terror grip her body as the demon stepped forward. "Rita, Rita, Rita! You shouldn't have done that. You are being a bad girl and bad girls need to be punished," Harry said while grinning, and his eyes started to glow as he released his magic. Rita whimpered in horror as she lost all color from her face. Chapter 92, The Little Beetle That Could, 3. Crack crack. Harry snapped the middle finger and the index finger of her left hand in retaliation. Rita screamed at the top of her lungs and she rolled around her head as that was the only part of her body she could still move. Rita continued to scream as tears continued to roll down her eyes, and while she was getting the pain out of her system, Harry simply decided to wait. She finally started to calm down and she glared at the demon with watery eyes, but moments later, the hate and defiance disappeared from her eyes. Instead, it was replaced by a look of defeat and submissiveness. Sorry. I won't do that again." Rita breathed out tiredly. Right now, she was looking extremely hideous with all of her makeup smeared thanks to her tears and snot, not that she cared. Good. Harry nodded his head in satisfaction. "So, do you remember the question?" Harry asked as he shifted his position. No. I remember," Rita blurted out hurriedly as she didn't want to know what he might do if she said no. "Yes, I have used my form to spy on the prominent figures of magical Britain," Rita answered in defeat, but in reality, she was already planning how to destroy Harry Potter and the entire Potter line with him using her poison quill. Now, an easy question. How did you find me? I mean, did you simply stumble upon me on luck, or did you come looking for me expecting me to find me, or did someone tell you about me?" Harry asked as he fiddled with the wand in his hand. "One of the employees told me in exchange for some extra galleons," Rita answered without missing a beat. She didn't have any problem throwing him under the bus, as a part of her mind blamed him for her current predicament. If he never told her about Harry, then she wouldn't be trailing him to get some dirt on him in the first place. Harry nodded his head in understanding. "All right. Moving on. What sort of information have you collected on the prominent figures of magical Britain?" Harry asked once again and once again. Rita hesitated a moment, but she started to speak without any urging from Harry's side. The type of information that would ruin their whole families and see them into Azkaban. Illegal businesses, backroom dealings, smuggling, and whatnot, Rita answered with a painful look on her face. "I see. So, where do you keep this information?" Harry asked, and Rita once again started to freak out and babble something useless and unnecessary from Harry's perspective. "They will kill." Rita began to scream in protest, but Harry didn't even give her the time to finish before he snapped her left thumb. Rita screamed and accidentally bit her tongue, but that was it, so Harry decided to wait and let her scream at her heart's content. After a couple of minutes, she finally calmed down and he started to speak again. "That wasn't something I wanted to hear," Harry warned her coldly as his eyes started to glow with power. Rita would have peed in her robes if her bladder wasn't already empty. She had never felt this terrified until now, and she knew that she couldn't handle any more pain or she might break in real. She never expected someone to use such barbaric means to get information out of her. She had dirt on all the dark families and they were the only ones who could have tortured her, but Harry Potter was different. She didn't have any of him, which she could use to threaten him. So, she simply decided to give up for the time being, but she mentally vowed to get back at him, one way or another. I have stored the information in 20 different locations all across the country," Rita answered while struggling with her breath. "I have some pre-addressed letters, which will be posted to their pre-mentioned recipients if I disappear for more than 5 days," Rita added after a small pause. "Who are these letters addressed to?" Harry asked curiously. "The chief editor of Daily Prophet, Barnabas Cuff, the director of the DMLE, Amelia Bones, and some of the senior orators, namely, Rufus Scrimgeour, Alastair Moody, Gawain Roberts, and finally, the Chief Warlock, Albus Dumbledore. With that, Rita continued to mention the names she had addressed her letters to, and Harry had to admit, Rita is an extremely smart, cunning, sly woman. Thanks for the information, Rita. I am glad that we finally came to an understanding. Harry smiled at her softly and Rita breathed out a sigh in relief. Now, sleep, Harry said as he waved his hand and Rita fell asleep. Harry stepped out of the portal and rolled his shoulders tiredly. Rita has given him a lot to think about. The information she had collected was bound to be useful. She had collected dirt on almost everyone, even the minister and his undersecretary weren't spared. He almost felt like he should let her go, the key word being almost. There was no way he was going to let her leave even with the threat of her failsafe looming over magical Britain. Against anyone else, it might have worked, but unfortunately for Rita, the letters weren't supposed to be posted until 5 days after her disappearance, so Harry had 5 days to come up with a solution, and 5 days were more than enough for him to come up with a solution. While Harry would have loved to see the chaos that would ensue, he wanted to have all that information in his grasp, so that he could hold that information over the heads of the people he would be blackmailing in the future. If that information was released, then they would lose their value, and instead of being important, they would become public knowledge. A stick would only work as long as everyone is afraid of it. Though I still think you should kill her. She might be acting submissive right now, but she won't hesitate to slip a knife between your ribs when the time is ripe, Lily growled angrily. Hadrian, you are powerful, extremely so, but don't let your power go into your head. It will be your hubris, Lily warned desperately. Don't worry, Mom. I already know that. That is why she is trapped in here, Harry said with a grin as he pulled out the potion vial he had grabbed from his apartment, but the vial was no longer empty. Right now, a blue water beetle could be seen lying inside the potion vial. I may not know legilimency, but she is a vindictive bitch. I know she will be waiting for a chance to stab me in the back, Harry admitted with a grin. Then why? Lily asked dumbly. She couldn't help but wonder why her Hadrian was still keeping her alive if he already knew that. Why am I still keeping her alive? Harry finished the question from her, and after getting a mental equivalent of a nod from her, he chuckled softly before he finally started to speak. Because she is going to be a lot more useful if kept alive, but under control, Harry explained softly. I already get that, so how are you planning to keep her under control? Lily asked in a condescending tone, but it was clear that she wasn't angry, but in fact, she was simply irritated at him for being so headstrong. I am thinking about my own version of Dark Mark. A much better one. The one created by Voldemort is already a piece of art, even though it has a lot of untapped potential. Harry smiled thoughtfully. Voldemort could use the mark to locate any of his followers, and in return, he could also apparate to their location. Not only that, but he could also use the mark to send short messages to his followers, and his followers could also send him short messages in return. Voldemort could use the mark to cause pain to his followers, but that wasn't all. He could use the dark mark to draw some magic from his followers, and that was probably the best feature of the dark mark. While Harry didn't need to borrow magic from his followers, he simply couldn't dismiss the idea as it might come in handy. He would better have the option and not use it rather than not having the option when he needed it. I simply need to add a function that would make it impossible for the ones I brand with my dark mark to hide their thoughts from me, Harry explained, and Lily seemed to hum thoughtfully even though she was quite impressed and excited with his idea. That could work, Lily mused thoughtfully, and Harry simply raised the potion vial to his eye level and glared at the blue water beetle lying inside. That will work, Harry assured her. The deadline for her failsafe is 5 days, which means, I have 4 days to modify the dark mark. I believe 4 days will be more than enough, Harry mused confidently. Oh. I have no doubt you will succeed, my son, especially now that you have made up your mind, Lily beamed at him proudly. Harry nodded his head before making his way toward his trunk. He popped his trunk open and placed the potion vial inside the potion ingredient cabinet to keep it safe for the time being. He wasn't going to carry the thing with him all the time, especially when he wasn't worried that she might escape. He had used mystic arts to knock her out, so there was no way she was going to wake up on her own. The stunning charm was well and good, but it was lacking in certain regards, as it was impossible to indefinitely knock out a witch or a wizard with the stunning charm, as their internal magic would slowly dispel the spell in a matter of a few hours. After closing the lid of his trunk, he finally decided to take a shower for real this time before doing anything else. He yawned tiredly as he made his way toward the bathroom and decided to take a nap after the shower. He was feeling somewhat tired after dealing with Rita Skeeter, and a nap would probably do him a lot of good. Harry entered the bathroom and only finished taking off his shirt when all of a sudden, he heard a soft pop from his side. At first, he thought that it was probably Doxy, but as soon as he got a glance at the unfamiliar house elf from the corner of his eyes, he knew that he had messed up. He cursed inside his mind as he started to raise his hand to attack the unfamiliar creature. He didn't have his wand out for the act, but this wasn't the time for an act. This was an emergency. He never expected someone to use a house elf to attack him, and that is why he dropped his guard. To be honest, he thought that the purebloods would probably find asking a house elf to kidnap or attack someone to be beneath them. After all, almost all the purebloods in Britain believed house elves to be inferior creatures. The Great Harry Poe! The elf began to exclaim cheerfully when all of a sudden, a red beam struck the creature straight on his face. The house elf slumped down on the ground like its strings have been cut. "Are you just going to ignore the fact that he was just about to call you the Great Harry Potter?" Lily asked Harry in a weird tone. "And for whatever reason, I don't believe he was here to harm you," Lily pointed out, even though she herself wasn't convinced of her own words. It was kind of weird, but somehow she believed her words to be true. "I guess," Harry muttered in an unsure tone. He didn't miss the excited and joyful look on the elf's face when the elf was speaking. That wasn't all, he also noticed adoration and devotion in the creature's eyes. "Let's see what he has to say for himself," Harry said as he jerked his hand upward to lift the creature in the air, and instead of putting his shirt back on again, he simply conjured himself a shirt with a simple thought. He returned back to his room and placed the house elf on the floor. After that, he pulled out his wand and started to draw a ritual circle. Binding a witch or wizard after disarming them was well and good, but that course of action was simply futile in the case of house elves, as they could cast magic without a focus. So, Harry needed to use some special means to stop a house elf from using their magic and keep it contained. Sealing the creature's magic would have been the easiest, but he had no idea how that would affect the creature when house elves are magical creatures. A magical creature would die if it ever lost its magic, and Harry had been looking for ways to contain house elves since he went to the States. After all, he was using Norton to gather information and spy on others, and since he could come up with that idea, the others could too. With a flick of his hand, Harry cast a locking charm along with a notice me not charm on the door, as he didn't want to be interrupted by anyone. He nodded his head in satisfaction and finally activated the ritual circle to keep the house elf contained. Now that all of his preparations were complete, he pointed his finger at the creature and cast the Renervate spell. The house elf woke up and blinked rapidly, revealing his tennis ball-sized green eyes. The house elf was dressed in a body-sized pillowcase, and from the stature of the creature, the house elf looked like he was being abused. Harry deduced that the house elf probably belonged to one of the pureblood families of this country. The house elf finally noticed Harry, and the look of adoration and devotion returned to his face before a look of horror flashed on his face. "Oh no! Dobby was captured by the Great Harry Potter, sir. What best Dobby be doing? Dobby will iron his hands later," Dobby exclaimed with a look of horror marring his face, and Harry nodded his head in satisfaction. He called it. The house elf belonged to a pureblood family, or he wouldn't have mentioned ironing his hands like it was a regular occurrence. Chapter 93, The Hazard Unseen, I. "So, Dobby? What do you want from me?" Harry asked with raised brows after Dobby finally started to calm down. Dobby stopped panicking, and a strangely afraid and concerned look appeared on his face. "The Great Harry Potter, sir, must leave this place at once. He is in grave danger," Dobby exclaimed in panic while shaking his head. "Danger? What kind of danger?" Harry asked curiously as he failed to hide the interest in his voice. He only needed to step back in Britain, and his enemies were already on the move. He decided that Britain was the right call. Dobby trembled and started to fidget uncomfortably while twisting his fingers in frustration. Dobby gave Harry a pleading look as he finally began to speak again. "Dobby can't say," Dobby exclaimed in panic as he continued to fidget uncomfortably. Harry quickly realized that whoever Dobby's master was, he or she was one of his enemies, and apparently, they were probably planning to kill him. "I see. If your master is involved in the planning, then why are you here? Warning me off?" Harry questioned as he narrowed his eyes at the house elf. "Dobby is a fan of the Great Harry Potter, sir. He is the one who defeated the bad man. Dobby is very grateful for that," Dobby exclaimed happily before a morose look flashed over his face. "Dobby has already said too much. Dobby is a bad elf. Dobby will bash his head against the wall to punish himself," Dobby muttered sullenly. "Phug. He is more nuts than Norton," Harry exclaimed inside his mind. "Oh. They must have been treating him really badly," Lily pointed out, feeling a hint of sympathy for the creature in her cold heart. "You don't need to punish yourself. You never told me anything. Harry tried to dissuade the creature from punishing himself as he felt somewhat bad for the creature. And thanks for the warning, Dobby. Harry thanked Dobby with a genuine smile on his face. Then the great Harry Potter will be leaving, right? Dobby asked excitedly, completely forgetting about the fact that he had to punish himself for revealing his master's plans to his enemy. This is exactly why you should never mistreat your house elves, but the purebloods in Britain were never a paragon of intelligence. Unfortunately, no. I won't be leaving, Harry answered, but before Dobby could protest any more, a red beam struck him on his face and he slumped down on the floor. Harry waved his hand and removed the ritual circle, which was supposed to keep Dobby contained. From the short conversation, Harry realized that Dobby was oddly devoted to him, and having a house elf bound to him would be quite useful too. Yes, Harry would need to find Dobby's master and then force them to release Dobby, but it would be worth it. Dobby was already loyal to him, and if Harry freed him from his abusive master, then the house elf would become even more devoted to him than he already was. Though in the meantime, he needed to keep Dobby contained. A golden glow surrounded his hands and he cast the same spell he had used on Rita Skeeter to keep her contained. Harry, are you sure about this? Lily asked tiredly. She simply couldn't understand why her son was taking such unnecessary risks. It would be so much better if he simply killed them. It could very well be an elaborate trap, Lily suggested, only for Harry to freeze, who was wondering where to hide Dobby for the time being. It is possible, Harry admitted with a nod of his head. But I will be getting myself a devoted house elf if I am right. The rewards are too much to give up, Harry added after her a small pause, and after hearing his words, Lily also sighed while nodding her head in understanding. She simply couldn't keep asking him to kill everyone and everything. It was just foolish. She realized that she needed to come up with better ways to use them for the sake of her son. Lily took a deep breath and vowed to do better next time. Meanwhile, Harry finally decided to hide Dobby in Jacqueline's house for the time being. He would also need to ask Morcy to keep an eye on Dobby, but it wasn't a big deal. Harry nodded his head and started to open a portal to Jacqueline's house. He hoped that nobody else was going to interrupt him again after he returned, or else he wouldn't be pleased. Half an hour later. Though I wonder who is planning to attack me, Harry mused as he walked out of the shower and started to get dressed. I would have said Lestranges, but all of them are rotting in prison. That still leaves the Malfoys, the Knotts, the Travers. Lily started to call out the family names of the Death Eaters she remembered, but before she could finish the list, Harry cut her off. That's already too much, Mom, Harry groaned, making Lily huff in exasperation. It's not my fault that more than half of the pureblood families were Voldemort fanatics, Lily scowled unhappily. I am not Blam. Harry stopped speaking when he felt Jacqueline approaching his door. Once again, he was interrupted by someone and he failed to take a nap. He sighed in defeat and started to make his way toward the door. Harry opened the door with a flick of his finger before Jacqueline could knock on the door, but instead of entering the room, she simply peered inside from the door frame. Brittany's parents are here. Jacqueline was here to simply deliver the news. Are you all right? You look tired, she added when she noticed the tired look on Harry's face. I am a bit tired, but weren't they supposed to arrive after 2 p.m.? Harry asked curiously. Yeah, they were supposed to, but they are here now. I don't think Sirius can exactly ask them to leave now, can he? Jacqueline asked with a shrug. Oh well, Harry shrugged and decided to go and meet Brittany's parents, as otherwise, it would be rude. By the way, someone is planning to attack me, Harry revealed, making Jacqueline frown. She looked around for a bit before she slipped inside the room and closed the door behind her back. Are you sure? This is an international event. If something happens here then it wouldn't look good on the British ministry, Jacqueline asked while frowning. They probably don't care. Harry griped dismissively. After all, they won't get a chance like this to get rid of me for their beloved master, Harry scowled. Don't take this the wrong way, as I am not doubting you, but how do you know someone is planning to attack you? Jacqueline asked as she plopped down on his bed. It's quite an interesting story. With that, Harry started to tell her about Dobby and she clenched her fists in anger when he told her about the abuse. If everything goes according to the plan, then I would be getting myself a devoted house elf, Harry revealed with a grin. That's good. Jacqueline nodded her head in agreement. So, what's the plan? Jacqueline asked. They won't be attacking until the game is over. Attacking before that doesn't make any sense, as the whole place would be milling with foreign dignitaries and foreign orators, who wouldn't mind killing the attackers, and after the game, everyone would be drinking for whatever reason. Harry explained while rubbing his chin. Yeah. If I was in their place then I would have done the same too. Jacqueline nodded her head as she understood what Harry was trying to say. Harry snorted in amusement. That would be the best course of action. Anyone with a lick of common sense would do that, but there is something I can't be sure about. Harry shook his head. I am not sure if they are going to attack me themselves or if they are going to hire mercenaries. Harry pondered. Jacqueline didn't have an answer for that. She knew that she wasn't as sharp as Harry even before he awakened his powers, so there wasn't much she could help him with when it came to thinking. What would you have done if you were in their place? Jacqueline asked after thinking for a bit. I would have hired mercenaries to create some sort of distraction while I would have gone to kill my enemy while everyone else would be paying attention to the distraction. Harry answered without missing a beat, and that is when something clicked inside his mind. The Death Eaters were sadistic bastards. At least, that is what his mom had told him, and he was inclined to believe her above anyone else. The Death Eaters loved causing pain and mayhem. Since the defeat of Dark Lord, a lot of people had also stopped fearing them, and an international event like the Quidditch World Cup was probably the best opportunity if they were planning to return, which meant that the Death Eaters were probably going to act as a distraction while mercenaries would target me. Harry couldn't say that it was the best plan, but he had to admit that it was a good plan. I think they are going to do the opposite. The Aurors in this country cannot use lethal attacks, so the Death Eaters won't be putting themselves at risk. Harry revealed thoughtfully. That's fucking stupid. Jacqueline whined in exasperation. So, what do you want me to do? Jacqueline asked with a determined look on her face. Nothing much, I simply want you to get the others to safety while I will slip away, Harry explained with a grin, but Jacqueline couldn't help but frown at his unfun plan. Chapter 94, The Hazard Unseen, 2. Hello, Mr. Lawrence, how have you been? Harry asked as he extended his hand toward the man. The said man accepted his hand with a jovial smile on his face. How many times have I asked you to call me Richard? The man asked as he shook Harry's hand and raised his brows. Unlike Daniel Harper, Richard Lawrence didn't hate Harry. More than enough times, Richard, Harry mumbled politely. Sorry, but old habits die hard, Harry added with a trace of amusement in his voice, making the man laugh. I don't think you are old enough to use that line, but fair enough, I guess, the man said while laughing. By the way, I don't think I should keep you myself any longer, as that would be quite rude, the man mumbled as he glanced toward his wife, Sirius, and the Tonkses. Hello, Harry, I hope you are having fun. Olivia Lawrence asked with a caring smile on her face. Of course, Mrs. Lore. Harry stopped when he noticed her eyes narrow at him. Olivia. This is my first time camping, and I am also getting to spend my time with Sirius and the Tonkses, Harry quickly corrected, and the smile returned to her face. That's good. So, are you excited about tonight's game? The woman asked, making Harry shrug as he also sat down at the center table. I don't even know who are playing, Harry revealed nonchalantly, surprising almost everyone in the room, except for Jacqueline and Brittany, who already knew about his disinterest in the game. And here Jacqueline was telling me that you can help me with the betting. Sirius griped unhappily as he glared at Jacqueline. The said girl simply rolled her eyes and turned toward Harry. The game is between Bulgaria and Ireland, Jacqueline answered as she summoned a magazine from another side of the tent with a flick of her wand. Here you go, both of their season performances are in there, Jacqueline said as she pushed the magazine toward Harry. He simply gave her an exasperated look before he picked up the magazine. This is Quidditch we are talking about. I don't think he could learn about the teams just by reading a magazine, Ted mumbled thoughtfully as he continued to stare at Harry, who was already shuffling through the magazine. For whatever reason, she wants you to show off. Though I don't understand why, Lily wondered aloud inside his mind. I think she wants me to start showing some of my brilliance so that I can make an impression that I am already quite smart, or she might have forgotten the fact that I wasn't planning to reveal my powers to everyone and ended up boasting my genius, Harry suggested in an unsure tone as he himself wasn't sure what was what. Well, I hope it's the former, Lily mumbled, but Harry decided not to say anything for the time being as he continued to browse through the magazine. After a few minutes, he was finally done and decided to close the magazine. He was already aware of the fact that everyone's gaze was fixated on him, so he wasn't surprised when he found that everyone was apparently looking at him. So, were you able to learn anything from that? Andy asked slowly with an unsure look on her face as she didn't want to hurt Harry's feelings, as according to her, Harry was a normal 14-year-old, who didn't know anything about familial love. Making fun of a boy like that would be quite low even for her. The Bulgarian team is pathetic except for Victor Krum, Harry answered with a shrug, and his words made Sirius swallow the retort. That is right. Ted mumbled slowly as he looked around, only to find that he wasn't the only one who was surprised. Ireland is a much better team all over, but their seeker isn't that good. So, my best guess? Harry asked himself as he rubbed his chin. He already knew what he wanted to say, but he was simply taking a break for the sake of theatrics. Ireland will wipe the floor with Bulgaria, but Crumb will catch the snitch, Harry said with a serious look on his face while nodding his head. Well, you heard the man. That is exactly what I am gonna do, Jacqueline declared proudly as she wiped the base of her nose with a haughty look on her face. Are you sure? Though how much are you planning to bet? Ted asked with a hint of worry in his voice. Jacqueline was as old as his own daughter, but she wasn't his daughter, so he exactly couldn't stop her. 1,000 galleons, Jacqueline revealed nonchalantly, making everyone in the room, except for Sirius, choke. 1,000 galleons weren't much, especially when he was planning to bet 10,000 galleons himself. Jacqueline also noticed the shocked look on everyone's faces. What? 1,000 gallons isn't that much. Jacqueline defended herself. Not everyone gets 1,000 galleons as their monthly allowance, Jackie Brittany pointed out with a bland look on her face, and for the second time, everyone choked except for Sirius and Harry at her words. Thou 1,000 galleons! Ted muttered with a horrified look on his face. It would take him a whole year to earn 1,000 galleons, and the girl, who was as old as his own daughter, received that same amount of money every month as her allowance. Ted started to wonder what the fuck he had been doing wrong with his life. Well, since my godson is saying that Ireland would win and Crumb will catch the snitch, then I will bet on that too, Sirius revealed with a toothy grin, making Andy shake her head at his childish antics. So, my dear godson, do you want to bet something too? Sirius asked as he flashed Harry a toothy grin. Please don't drag him into this. Andy exclaimed tiredly. Andy, it's all right. Since I am quite sure about my guess, I will be betting too. Some extra gold isn't going to hurt me, Harry said confidently. Andy and Olivia wanted to say something, but they were stopped by their respective husbands as it wasn't their place to stop him, and there were some lessons everyone needed to learn on their own. All right then. Let's go. Sirius exclaimed cheerfully as he stood up. We haven't had lunch yet. Andy growled out with a scowl, making Sirius slump down in his seat. All of you can do whatever you want after lunch, Andy added as she gave Harry a look of disapproval from the corner of her eyes. He didn't miss that, but he simply didn't care enough. Sirius, Harry, and Jacqueline could be seen making their way toward the betting office, which was being run by the British Ministry of Magic and the Goblins in collaboration after lunch. The Goblins were the ones who were mainly managing the gold, and the Ministry was simply helping along with the management as they knew how the Goblins could be in case they were losing money, and the Ministry wanted to run everything smoothly. The three of them arrived inside the betting office and immediately started to make their way toward the most empty counter, but before Harry could walk up to the line, he sensed someone unknown approaching him from the side. He stopped in his tracks and turned to the side only to find a platinum blonde-haired boy approaching him. His hair was sleeked back tightly and his face was marred with haughty looks. You must be Harry Potter, right? The boy asked haughtily. It was hard to recognize you since you look nothing like the pictures in your books, the boy added with a sneer. Harry had no idea what was the boy's problem, but the boy reminded him of Owen Curtis too much. Yes, I am, and who might you be? Harry asked as he narrowed his eyes at the boy. I am Malfoy, Draco Malfoy. I would suggest you to etch that name into your mind, the boy introduced himself haughty. I do not know who you are, but you think yourself to be entitled. Unfortunately for you, I am not into men, Harry answered with a frown. He obviously knew who the boy was now that the boy had revealed his name, but that didn't mean that Harry had to humor him. Draco blinked at Harry's words, as he wasn't sure what Harry was trying to say, and it took him a couple of seconds to finally understand how he was insulted, and when he did, a look of anger and rage flashed across his face. That's not what I was trying to say. Draco snapped, but moments later, a mocking grin formed on his face. Well, what else can I expect from one of the Western barbarians? Draco grinned mockingly. Well, that's pretty hilarious coming from an inbred peacock, Harry returned with a similar type of grin on his face. Draco's face turned red in anger, but before he could say any more, someone called him out. Ah, Draco! There you are, it was a feminine voice. A regal-looking woman stepped out from the crowd and her eyes immediately focused on Draco, and then her gaze shifted toward Harry. I see, you have found, Mr. Potter, the woman said primly as she arrived close to the duo. Harry immediately recognized the woman as Narcissa Malfoy, as her looks were extremely unique. He had never seen a piebald witch until now. Hello, I am Narcissa Malfoy, and I don't know if Sirius had told you about me or not, but I am his cousin. The woman introduced herself primly. Meanwhile, Harry simply grabbed her hand and brushed his lip on the back of her palm. Draco made a disgusted face, and Narcissa simply smiled. What's going on here? Before Harry could say anything, Sirius showed up and decided to interrupt the conversation. Chapter 95, The Hazard Unseen, 3. What's going on here? Before Harry could say anything, Sirius showed up and decided to interrupt the conversation. Harry felt slightly annoyed at the sudden interruption. It wasn't like he had any problems, but he chose not to voice his displeasure. Sirius clearly hated the woman and her spawn, so he simply decided to let the scene play on its own. Hello, to you too, cousin. Narcissa greeted the man with a sniff. I was simply greeting your godson, the woman answered as she glanced toward Harry. Well, now that you have met him, why don't you move along? Sirius suggested with a scowl. He didn't want the woman anywhere close to his godson. Now, Sirius. There is no need to be so rude. You clearly don't have any manners, but that doesn't mean that the others don't. Narcissa smiled sharply. It is not like I want to hurt him or anything, the woman added, making Sirius scowl unhappily. With you, I would never know until you stab me in the back, Sirius growled as he glared at the woman hatefully. Now you are simply bad-mouthing me, cousin, Narcissa retorted innocently, looking a bit offended. I am a simple housewife, she added, and Sirius scoffed disbelievingly at her words. I hope you aren't insulting my wife, Black. A man stepped beside Narcissa, and the man was simply a bigger and older version of Draco, so the man's identity was pretty obvious. It's not an insult if it's the truth, Sirius retorted with a sneer. A glint of anger flashed in the man's eyes, but Harry didn't miss it even though the glint was gone as soon as it arrived. The man smiled condescendingly as he looked down at Sirius and Harry haughtily. It is clear that we are unwanted here, Lucius said as he turned toward his wife and son. Draco looked like he had sucked a lemon, but Narcissa simply nodded her head and started to lead Draco away from Sirius and Harry with Lucius walking beside her. Weird. I didn't expect him to leave so easily without throwing any insult at us, Sirius mumbled in confusion as he inclined his head. Then he simply shrugged and turned toward Harry with a look of concern on his face. Are you all right, Harry? She didn't do anything to you, did she? Sirius asked worriedly as he placed his hands on Harry's shoulders. While it wasn't an important piece of information, he decided to store the information inside his head for the time being. Right now, he needed to placate a very irate and worried godfather. Yes, I am all right and she didn't do anything to me, Sirius. You are getting worried for no reason, Harry answered calmly, trying to assure the man that he was all right. Harry, you don't know her. She is like a vicious snake. Sirius frantically shook his head as he started to shake Harry by his shoulders. I wouldn't know, but she didn't try anything with me. She simply introduced herself to me and that's when you arrived, Harry explained honestly, but there was a hint of annoyance in his voice. Oh, well. Sirius said unsurely but decided to drop the matter as he noticed that Harry was getting annoyed at his insistence. Jacqueline is keeping our spot in line. Let's get going or she might get annoyed. Sirius decided to change the topic as it was a smart thing to do. Harry nodded his head in understanding and started to follow his godfather. By the way, can we buy some omniculars? I don't want to squint my eyes all the time during the game, Harry pointed out all of a sudden when he remembered that the Quidditch field was huge and since he didn't want to be bored, he wanted to be able to at least watch the game without any difficulties. Sure. I was already planning to buy omniculars for everyone, Sirius said while nodding his head in agreement. A few hours later. Whoa, Sirius. You didn't pull any punches. Tonks whispered giddily as she looked around from the top box. The seats in the top box could be bought by anyone, but each seat was mind-numbingly expensive. A single seat in the top box would cost more than 2 months of her salary, so she was pretty excited to be able to watch the game from here. The top box wasn't empty as the topmost row was already occupied by foreign delegates and some of the British Ministry employees, but Cornelius Fudge wasn't anywhere to be seen. The commentary box, which was on top of the top box, was also empty for the time being. Who? Blonde peacocks incoming. Tonks blurted out in a low tone as she noticed a trio of blondes at the stairs. Nymphadora. Andy admonished her daughter with a glare, making Tonks scowl unhappily at the use of her forbidden name and at the admonishment, especially when she didn't say anything wrong. So true, Tonks. Sirius exclaimed with a silly grin on his face as he raised his hand in the air for a high five. Tonks grinned and high-fived him, making Andy shake her head in disappointment. The Malfoys walked past their group and made their way toward our seats. The three of them barely stopped to give their group a look, but they didn't do anything more than that. Not even a sneer. Maybe I am dreaming, Ted muttered as he pinched himself to make sure he wasn't dreaming. You aren't dreaming, but even I can't believe that they didn't sneer at us, Andy muttered thoughtfully, and Harry finally started to connect the dots. The Malfoys were obviously acting weird, and Lucius was a known Death Eater, who was cleared off his charges thanks to Imperious defense, but anyone with even a lick of common sense would know that he was faking the whole thing to save his ass. They don't want to draw any attention to themselves for whatever reason, and they are trying so hard to lay low that almost everyone could notice that they are acting all weird, Harry concluded inside his mind. If they aren't involved in the attack, then I will eat my shoe, Harry said while mentally nodding his head. I don't think you need to go that far, Lily trailed off. She didn't know any of the Malfoys personally, but she could see that they were acting weirdly. I think you should keep an eye on them, Lily added thoughtfully after some time. Or, they are simply a part of the plan, Harry pointed out when he felt someone glaring at him, but much to his surprise, his eyes failed to locate the person glaring at him. Apparently, the person was hiding under an invisibility cloak, and the only reason Harry decided to hold his hand was because a house elf was accompanying the person hiding under the invisibility cloak. While Harry was confident that he could easily take down the house elf, the person hiding under the cloak, and the Malfoys with a bit of effort, he didn't want to start a fight without any proof. After all, it would be him throwing the first spell, and the others around him would be in danger too if he started a fight right here. Additionally, the foreign dignitaries were also here. Starting some shit here would be foolish, no matter how tempting it was. Why? Lily asked in a confused tone, and instead of answering, Harry simply sent her the memory where he found a person hiding under an invisibility cloak. Ah! They are quite well prepared, Lily pointed out grumpily. Yet. Well, unfortunately for them, invisibility cloaks can't hide a person from me, Harry pointed out as he leaned back in his seat. The spell he learned from Sirius was quite useful, and combined with his danger sense, it was impossible for even the Ancient One to hide from him. He wondered how Karl Mordo or Sirius were able to hide from his danger sense, but after some research and tests, he learned that his danger sense won't kick in until whoever was watching him considered him to be a threat. His danger sense was triggered when Moody and Tonks were watching him, and he knew that Tonks didn't consider him to be a threat, which left Moody. The man was paranoid enough to consider his own shadow a threat, so it made perfect sense. What are you going to do? Lily asked with a hint of concern in her voice. Nothing for the time being. They would be foolish to make their move right now, Harry pointed out, and much to Lily's dissatisfaction, she seemed to agree with her son's words. They are the Malfoys, right? I have heard about them. They don't have a good reputation in our country, Richard spoke in a low tone, earning nods from Sirius, Ted, Andy, and Tonks. Unfortunately, they are prominent figures in our country, Sirius griped unhappily as he threw up his hands in the air. He and his Death Eater buddies were able to buy their way out of Azkaban with gold, and now look at them. Sirius scowled and Andy pinched his arm. Not here, Sirius. I understand your feelings, but not here, Andy reminded him while giving him a pointed look, and Sirius simply sagged in his seat at his words. This was a public place, he had no idea who might be hearing right now. Oh well, why don't we ignore all the unpleasant rise and think about the gold we are going to win? Jacqueline suggested with a clap, trying to change the topic. Damn good idea. Sirius bit out passionately, making Tonks raise her brows at them. Wait. You guys are betting? Tonks asked with a hint of excitement in her voice. Chapter 96, The Hazard Unseen, 4. Whoa. This is so cool. Someone exclaimed from the entrance, and Harry and his group turned around to see the newest arrival. Harry's mood soured when he noticed the bunch of redheads walk into the top box, with a look of awe etched on their faces. He didn't hate the Weasleys or anything, but didn't want to be anywhere close to them, but he simply decided to suck it up and bear with it. Did they lower the prices of the tickets? Lucius Malfoy wondered loudly from his spot, his voice being loud enough to be clearly heard by everyone inside the top box. Weasley, did you sell your hovel to buy tickets? Lucius asked Arthur with a sneer on his face, making the red-haired man look away in shame. It was pretty clear that the man was simply being cruel just for the sake of being cruel. All the Weasleys who were looking odd and excited only a few moments ago started to display different reactions. The younger ones were looking down at their own feet in shame, while the twins were hatefully glaring at the blonde-haired peacock. Arthur and his wife were simply fiddling uncomfortably, leaving their eldest sons, who were also glaring at the Malfoys hatefully. Shut up your trap, Malfoy. Nobody wants to listen to the shite you are spouting. Sirius exclaimed as he rolled his eyes in exasperation, making some of the foreign delegates openly snicker at Malfoy while the rest simply decided to smirk at him in amusement. The elder Malfoy glared at Sirius and opened his mouth to say something, but Narcissa placed her hand on his arm, stopping him from saying anything. The man glared at his own wife and huffed in annoyance before staring at the Quidditch field hatefully, leaving only the youngest Malfoy to hatefully glare between Sirius and the Weasleys. It was clear that the boy wasn't sure who he should hate more, the Weasleys, or Sirius. Meanwhile, Narcissa simply sneered at the Weasleys before pointing her nose in the air haughtily. Damn! They are still the Malfoys I know, and here I was thinking that they woke up today and decided to have a change of heart. Ted muttered while shaking his head in disappointment. The Malfoys change? Don't kid yourself, Dad, Tonks huffed as she flicked her purple hair over her shoulders. Sirius, thanks for that, Arthur said gratefully as he slowly slipped into his seat. The rest of the Weasleys also started to slip into their seats, and their seats were right behind theirs. I wasn't expecting him to pull something like that, Arthur added, looking a bit embarrassed. Sirius simply waved his hands dismissively before he finally started to speak. No need to thank me, Arthur. He shouldn't have done that in the first place, Sirius huffed unhappily. I hate him and his guts, Sirius added with a scowl. Ah. Well, the man slowly nodded his head while rubbing the back of his head. Sirius, let me introduce you to my family, the man said, and started to introduce his family, starting with his wife. When he was finally done, Sirius decided to return the favor and started to introduce his own family to the Weasleys. Harry noticed that for whatever reason, Molly Weasley seemed to hate Andy and the rest of her family. You are Harry Potter, for real? The youngest son asked Harry, looking extremely excited, and Harry started to have a déjà vu for the second time today. For the second time, someone was reminding him of Owen Curtis, and it wasn't a good thing. Yes, nice to meet you too, Ronald Weasley. Even though Harry didn't want to, he extended his hand toward the boy as he simply couldn't blow off the boy. That would be just wrong. Really? The boy asked skeptically. You look nothing like the pictures from the books. You don't even wear spectacles and you don't have a scar, the boy pointed out doubtfully as he narrowed his eyes at Harry. Harry noticed that the boy didn't accept his hand. Ronald! How can you be so rude to the poor boy? Albus had to send him away from his homeland. Don't treat him like that. Molly Weasley snapped at her youngest son while giving him disapproving looks. He already had such a hard line. He must be looking for real friends. Apologize now. The woman added disapprovingly. Harry, Jacqueline, and Brittany bristled at her words, while Brittany's parents, Ted, Andy, and Sirius looked at the woman weirdly. Only a few moments ago, Sirius introduced Jacqueline and Brittany as his best friends, and only moments later, the obnoxious woman was saying that Harry needed real friends. If this wasn't fooked up, then none of them knew what was. Sorry, the boy mumbled with a red face. Harry simply waved it off, even though he was more than a bit annoyed right now. It is all right, Harry shrugged before noticing the youngest Weasley making doe eyes at him. He started to wonder if the girl had a crush on him. She better not. If that weaselette dares to make a move on you, then I will skin her alive, Lily snapped in anger. Molly better control her daughter, or they would need to have a closed casket funeral for that little twerp, she added with a growl, making Harry grimace internally. This is exactly what he was worried about for some time. His mom was already extremely graphic with her murderous plans, and he didn't want to imagine what she might do if some girl dared to make a move on him. Thankfully, his mom never reacted violently whenever he was with Jacqueline or Brittany. Calm down, Mom. No need to get violent, Harry tried to placate his mom, which seemed to work as she didn't say anything else after that. The moment all of you were waiting for has finally arrived. I am Ludovic Bagman, your beloved commentator. The man exclaimed loudly with a sonorous charm applied over himself, and fireworks erupted from the sides of the commentary box. The stadium was almost packed with hundreds of thousands of witches and wizards started to cheer loudly. Harry had to admit, a lot of people loved the silly game. Looks like we aren't late. Cornelius Fudge finally arrived at the top box, along with the Irish and the Bulgarian ministry. There were few people along with them, but thankfully, Cornelius didn't bring his pet toad with him. Harry was already tense, especially with the Malfoys, the man hiding under the invisibility cloak, and the Weasleys. He didn't want to deal with the pink toad over that. That's Barty Crouch. He is the one who tossed Sirius into prison without a trial, Tonks whispered while glaring at a man accompanying Cornelius Fudge. Really? He still has his job? Jacqueline asked weirdly as she stared at the man from the corner of her eyes. Well, he will be retiring next year from what I have heard. Apparently, he has something in the works and that is why he still has his job, Tonks answered with a shrug. She knew exactly why the man was still working for the ministry. After all, he was the one arranging the Triwizard tournament along with Ludo Bagman, so the ministry simply couldn't toss him out at this stage. Your ministry needs to get their shit together, Jacqueline huffed as she crossed her arms in front of her chest. Couldn't have agreed more, Tonks said while nodding her head. Ludo Bagman finally announced the arrival of the Ireland team. The Ireland team was dressed in green robes and much to the dismay of the Nimbus Broom Company who were sponsoring the Quidditch World Cup, the whole team was using firebolt brooms. Leprechauns were the Ireland team's mascots and they started to rain leprechaun gold over the crowd. A lot of people jumped to grab as much gold as they could, but Harry already knew that the gold was fake, so he didn't even bother in the first place. A cheapskate like Harry would easily recognize fake gold from real gold. Ronald Weasley jumped around to grab all the gold he could with a greedy look on his face until one of the twins pointed out that the gold was fake. When the crowd finally started to calm down after Ludo Bagman finally announced the arrival of the Bulgarian team. The Bulgarian team was dressed in red robes and once again much to the dismay of the Nimbus Broom Company, they were also using firebolt brooms. Then the Bulgarian mascots, the Velas finally arrived and the crowd erupted in cheers. The wizards were the ones creating most of the noise, but who cared, and Harry had to admit, the Velas knew how to get a reaction from the crowd. All of them were scantily dressed and their performance combined with their allure was simply entrancing even though Harry wasn't affected in the slightest. Though he couldn't say the same about the others. The youngest Malfoy would have probably jumped into the pitch if it wasn't for his mother and it was the same with Ronald, who was being held down by his brothers. Harry looked around the top box to see how everyone was reacting and he was disappointed to find that a lot of people were barely holding themselves back from jumping down. Ah! At least, someone isn't salivating, Andy pointed out as she gave him a smile before she started to glare at Sirius, who was staring at the Velas with clear lust in his eyes. Thankfully, Ted was handling the allure much better than Sirius was, or Andy would have been very cross with him. The Velas finally stopped performing and Ludo Bagman finally announced the start of the game. Chapter 97, The Hazard Unseen, v. Would you look at that, people? Victor Crumb finally catches the snitch. Ludo Bagman exclaims from the commentary box, looking excited and a bit constipated at the same time. Unfortunately, they still lost the match. At least, Crumb was able to save his team from a complete washout. That would have been embarrassing, Ludo announced sullenly. He was happy that Crumb caught the snitch, but at the end of the day, he still lost the bet. In a moment of weakness, he had bet more gold on Bulgarians winning the match instead of betting on Crumb catching the snitch. Now, he lost that bet and now he owed the goblins a lot of gold. Gold that he didn't have, and if he failed to pay the gold, then death would be the least of his worries. After all, the goblins weren't known for killing their debtors. If the goblins got to him then he would be wishing for death. Though everything wasn't lost. There was still the Triwizard tournament and there was quite some time before the deadline. He was sure that he could arrange something. Maybe, he could try fixing the tournament. Yeah. That was a good idea. While Ludo was patting himself on the back for coming up with such an excellent plan, Harry and his group were already making their way out of the top box with big smiles plastered on their faces. I can't believe you predicted that. How in the name of Merlin did you predict that? Tonks asked with a groan as she rubbed her face in annoyance. True, she won the bet, but her wins weren't much as she didn't bet on Ireland. She hoped the Bulgarians would win with Crumb catching the snitch, but the reality was cruel. I simply looked up how they were performing this season and that was all I needed, he answered Tonks with a shrug, making her turn toward her others for some sort of confirmation, only for Andy and Ted to give her a solemn nod. If I knew that his prediction was this good then I would have bet something too, Ted mumbled under his breath, looking really dejected. Me too, my friend, me too. Maybe next time. Richard suggested, looking dejected too, but he was still looking forward to the next time as he didn't want to miss another chance like this. He was also trying to forget his misery, but unfortunately, Sirius was making it really hard for them. Oh, boy. I am rich. I am freaking rich. 100,000 galleons. Oh yush, baby. Sirius was walking at the front while skipping in joy. Thankfully, Jacqueline wasn't acting like him or the scene would have been much more embarrassing. Well, at least, someone is happy, Tonks bit out unhappily as she threw Sirius a dirty look, not that the man noticed. He was having way too much right now and he couldn't care any more about stuff like weird looks. After glaring at Sirius back unhappily for the next few moments, Tonks finally turned her glare toward Jacqueline. The said girl wasn't making a fool of herself by acting like Sirius, but she was definitely happy. "What about you, Jackie?" Tonks asked unhappily as her hair shifted into mousy brown. "Well, I am happy too. 10,000 galleons are a lot. I am going to buy myself a firebolt before anything else." Jacqueline beamed at Tonks, making the ever-shifting girl scowl unhappily at Jacqueline. Tonks also wanted to win gold and buy a firebolt, but why was the world so fucking cruel to her? "Don't worry, Tonks, I would have gifted you a firebolt, but I worry that your mother might have a stroke. After all, you aren't that graceful, to begin with," Harry said as he smiled sadly at the girl, making her growl as she felt an invisible arrow pierce her heart. Tonks was about to deliver her own snarking retort, but the world kind of hated her, so she tripped and fell flat on her face, earning a few chuckles. "See, daughter, Harry is such a thoughtful boy," Andy said with a hint of amusement in her voice. "Emotional damage." Tonks screamed inside her mind as Harry and Jacqueline helped her up. "Thanks," Tonks mumbled in a low tone. She fell so regularly that someone rarely helped her up. "Don't mention it, Tonks. You are my friend," Harry said as he gave her a genuine smile. Sirius might be his godfather, but the Tonks was the one he was most impressed with. She came off as a clumsy and dumb woman with shape-shifting abilities, but she was loyal as foo*k and she was a nightmare with a wand. If he could bring her into his fold, then he would gain a great asset and a priceless ally. Jacqueline and Brittany gave him a weird look as the two of them knew how much of a loner and picky person Harry was, and now he was calling someone a friend after meeting them for a couple of days. The two of them found it quite weird. Tonks simply huffed and dusted off her robes. She opened her mouth to say something, but she stopped when she heard someone call Sirius from the back. Sirius stopped in his excited stride and turned around only to find the Weasleys approaching them. "Sirius, I'm wondering if you could join us for dinner?" Arthur asked, looking a bit hopeful, but before Sirius could answer, Andy started to speak. She didn't want to be anywhere close to Molly. That woman vexed her to no end. "Unfortunately, Mr. Weasley, we have already prepared everything for dinner, so we have to refuse the invitation." Andy politely refused the invitation on Sirius' behalf with a sweet smile on her face. Molly Weasley narrowed her eyes at Andy. Molly seemed to be quite displeased with the refusal, but she held her tongue for whatever reason. "We have?" Sirius asked in a bewildered tone, and Ted practically winced at the question. "Yes, we have," Andy insisted without missing a beat. Anyone with a working brain could see what Andy was trying to do, but apparently, Sirius didn't have a working brain. "Well, then we can always invite them," Sirius suggested with a grin on his face. He was so giddy about winning the bet that he completely missed the meaningful look Andy was giving him. Harry barely held himself back from face-palming himself. He wanted to avoid tangling with the Weasleys at any cost, but Sirius simply couldn't take a hint. "If that's all right with you," Arthur simply accepted the offer with a smile on his face. After that, he hashed out some details with Sirius before he finally started to leave with the rest of his family. The Weasleys had something to take care of back in their tent, and they would visit Sirius after they were finally done. Now that Arthur accepted the invitation, there was nothing Andy could do to stop them from visiting, so she could only rage in complete silence. Of course, Sirius was going to pay, and no matter how much Harry tried, he couldn't bring himself to care about Sirius. The said man finally turned toward Andy and found her glaring at him coldly. He winced before taking a step back in fear. "What did I do?" Sirius asked nervously, looking around. He wanted some support from the others, but unfortunately for him, the others simply decided to leave him to his fate. "Nothing," Andy growled out as she turned around on her heel and started to make her way toward the tent. "Oh boy, Sirius. You foo*ked up, man. I have rarely seen her that angry. I don't remember the last time when I saw her this angry," Tonks whispered furiously while looking at Sirius in pity. He gulped nervously as he started to sweat. "It wasn't because I invited the Weasleys, right?" Sirius asked while fidgeting nervously. "Yes, that is exactly why she is mad at you," Harry said before patting his shoulder as he walked past him. "I don't know when they are going to attack, and now I have to deal with the Weasleys. It will be like walking on eggshells, as they will be certainly reporting back to Dumbledore," Harry growled internally. During the game, he was keeping an eye on the Malfoys and the man hiding under the invisibility cloak. Sometime in the middle of the game, Malfoy Sr. left his wife and son to sit with the minister. Harry was tempted to cast a listening charm, but once again, he had no idea who could be watching, so he couldn't risk it. Though he didn't believe that Malfoy Sr. was talking to the minister about the attack. There was something else Harry realized during the game. Apparently, the Malfoys weren't aware of the man hiding under the cloak. So, if they were working together, the man hiding under the cloak never told the Malfoys that he was going to be there in the top box with them. Then there was something Harry couldn't understand. He saw the man hiding under the cloak stealing the youngest Weasley boy's wand while the boy was busy watching the Velas during halftime. Maybe the man wanted to use some other wand for the attack, but why would he steal a random wand like that? Though Harry couldn't be sure if the wand was going to be a good or bad fit for the man. He could have said for sure if the man wasn't hiding under an invisibility cloak. Apparently, appraisal didn't work on someone hiding under an invisibility cloak. At least, he got to learn something new today. Chapter 98, The Hazard Unseen, 6. So, any changes in plans? Jacqueline asked in a hopeful tone. She still wasn't a fan of the original plan, as she would be running away with the others from the action, especially when Harry finished telling her about the Malfoys probably being involved in the attack and the man hiding under the invisibility cloak. It wasn't her fault that she wanted to kick some asses and take names. Right now, no. We will proceed as planned, which means you won't be staying back with me. Harry pointed out with a roll of his eyes. You need to take them to safety. You are the only one who I can trust this with, Harry said passionately as he patted her shoulder. Ugh. Fine. I will do it, but you need to plan something better for me the next time, Jacqueline demanded as she poked at his chest with her finger. She narrowed her eyes at him when she didn't receive an immediate answer from him. All right. I promise, Harry promised her some action with a nod of his head. Then all of a sudden, he raised his finger to his lips. Jacqueline immediately understood what Harry was talking about, and moments later, someone knocked on the door. He flicked his wand to open the door, only to reveal Tonks standing on the other side of the door. Watcher. Tonks waved at them as she walked in. What are you guys talking about? Tonks asked as she summoned a chair from the side and plopped down with a tired look on her face. We are talking about the money we won, Harry easily lied. It was getting easier and easier for him to lie with a straight face. So, how much did you win? Tonks asked curiously as she remembered that Harry never told anyone how much gold he was betting. Harry thought for a moment before he decided to answer her truthfully. 3,000 galleons, Harry answered. He had some gold left from his last trip to the Diavik diamond mines. 3,000 galleons. Tonks choked when she heard the amount. It would take her more than 2 years to earn that amount of gold, and the boy was betting that much when he was yet to start his 4th year. Why is this world so unfair to poor old me? Tonks sobbed inside her mind as there was no way she was going to break down in front of a 14-year-old, no matter how much she wanted to cry. She had an image to maintain. Wow! That's a lot of gold. You better buy me something nice, Jacqueline breathed out with a grin on her face. Don't worry, Harry simply agreed as he was already planning to buy something nice for her and Brittany. By the way, is there something you wanted, Tonks? Harry asked as he turned toward Tonks, who was still wallowing in her misery. She blinked when Harry called her out, and it took her a moment to register his question. Yeah. There was something I wanted to talk about, privately, Tonks said as she glanced at Jacqueline with a meaningful look on her face while putting more emphasis on the privately part. Sorry, Jackie, but I promise I will make it up to you, and this is really important, Tonks apologized with a pleading look on her face. Jacqueline was a nice girl who didn't hate her, so didn't want to ruin their friendship. Harry turned toward Jacqueline and gave her a nod. She stood up and smiled at Tonks. Harry had told Jacqueline everything except about Lily, but Tonks didn't need to know that for the time being, as Harry had no idea if he could trust her completely. After Jacqueline was finally gone, Tonks whipped out her wand and cast a locking charm and privacy charm on the door. Harry was a bit surprised when he saw the spells Tonks used. The spells she used were probably aura-grade spells, as her locking charm and privacy charm were probably the strongest locking and privacy charm he has come across. It must be something very important, Harry pointed out loud, and Tonks nodded her head with a grave look on her face. Her usual playful look was nowhere to be found. Instead, she was looking serious, dead serious. Why did you act like that in front of Arthur Weasley? Tonks asked in a formal tone. Harry could feel the tension in her voice. Are you interrogating me? Harry asked as he raised his eyebrows. He might like her, but he wasn't going to play ball if she was hoping to interrogate him. Laying low has its uses, but laying low could get foo asterisk ked from 9 ways to Sunday if someone was hoping to make Harry do something against his wishes. No. Not yet, but you have to understand that Arthur and Molly aren't like other people. The two of them are Dumbledore's followers and they obviously report back to him. There is a chance that their children are already Dumbledore's followers, can't say for sure, but the thing is that they report back to Dumbledore. If you had slipped then they would have reported back to Dumbledore. There is always a chance that they might have already, Tonks explained gravely. Yes, I already know that. That is exactly why I acted like that, and regardless of your belief, I do know what's at stake. After all, it is me who he is after, Harry answered coolly. Tonks stared at him for the next few seconds before finally releasing a sigh. She leaned back in the chair with a tired look on her face. Maybe you understand, I can't be sure. Nobody can, except for you. Though we can't stop worrying. We don't know what exactly Dumbledore has planned for you, but it isn't anything good, Tonks said while shaking her head. Alastor had brought her into the fold after making her swear a bunch of secrecy oaths. The oaths would protect the secrets in case she got caught, and they tried to rummage through her mind using legilimency. Tonks knew what she was getting into, and while she was nervous, she was excited too. She was getting to be a part of something big and important, and even though she was probably being involved because she already found out some things in her metamorphmagus ability, she couldn't help but feel that she finally achieved something great on her own. I see. I will keep that in mind. Was there anything else? Harry asked, making Tonks frown at him. You haven't answered my question though, Tonks pointed out. Harry was a bit surprised that she remembered that. Harry made a note in his mind that Tonks probably wasn't as dumb as he was thinking her to be. He might even need to re-evaluate her threat level. I knew that he would probably report back to Dumbledore, and I don't want to spend time with anyone who might be reporting back to him, so I had to improvise, as I couldn't outright declare that I don't want to do anything with them. That would have raised flags of another kind, Harry answered with a shrug. He could have refused to answer, but that would have made Tonks and whoever she was working for wary, and Harry wanted to avoid that at this stage. He only needed to wait until Dumbledore's awesome plan to bring him back to Britain fails spectacularly, and after that, he could finally start showing his true colors. For the time being, he was going to let all the chess masters think that they had an advantage. Though he wondered how they were going to react when the truth was finally revealed. By the way, who did you mean by we? Harry asked. Alastor was pretty vague about that, so he wondered if he could skim anything from Tonks. I can't tell you that, even if I could have told you. We can't have Dumbledore realize that some are working against whatever he is trying to do, Tonks answered with a conflicted look on her face, and Harry realized that she was probably under oaths from her words. Oh, and please be careful around Molly Weasley, she practically worships the ground. Albus Dumbledore walked on, Tonks warned Harry with a look of concern in her voice. Thank why? Harry couldn't finish his words before explosions shook their tent, followed by loud screams. What the hell? Harry blurted out with a surprised look on his face, even though he knew what was happening. Wait here! Tonks exclaimed hurriedly as she flicked her wand to unlock the door and ran out. Moments later, Sirius rushed into the room, looking frantic and worried. Harry, we need to leave, Sirius blurted out, unhelpfully, before he started to drag Harry out of the room. Harry started to act like he was supposed to be. What is happening, Sirius? Harry asked worriedly, as they could still hear the screams and explosions from the distance, but they knew that the explosions and the screams were getting close. I don't know, but someone is attacking the campsite, Sirius explained hurriedly before they arrived in the hall area of the tent. The others were there too, except for Tonks, and everyone was looking tense and worried. Where is Tonks? Sirius asked Andy, who simply stared toward the tent exit. Andy, I am sorry, but we can't wait. We need to get out of here. Sirius explained with a hard look on his face. He was no longer acting goofy, but he was acting like a man in charge. Andy wanted to protest, but Ted pulled her into his arms. Andy, Sirius is right. We need to leave. She is a big girl and she is an Auror. She can take care of herself. I am worried too, but staying here isn't going to help her, Ted explained as he decided to be the voice of reason. Andy meekly nodded her head. She was completely out of character, and now Harry could see that she might have named her daughter Nymphadora, but she loved her daughter to death. What about the stuff and tent? Richard asked worriedly as he looked back toward his room. I will ask Doxy to get the whole tent after we leave, Sirius hurriedly explained and started to lead them out of the tent. While the house elves were free to travel through the wards of the campsite, they couldn't take or bring any human along with them. Though a house elf could bring someone outside the wards and then they could walk in. As soon as Harry and the others ran out of the tent, he felt several hostile gazes focus on him. The game was finally on and Harry was going to face the challenge head-on. Chapter 99, Fatal Mistake They Made, They turned toward the direction where the explosions and the screams were coming from and they could only see a few tents on fire. While everyone was busy staring at the burning tents in the distance, Harry signaled Jacqueline that he was about to make his move. She simply gave him a subtle nod in acknowledgement as she knew what to do now. "Come on. We need to leave the wards so that we can take the porte-quet," Sirius exclaimed as he started to drag Harry with him. The others quickly followed them as all of them wanted to get out as quickly as possible. While being dragged around by Sirius, Harry was constantly scanning the tents for occupants. Most of the tents were already empty and people could be seen running around. Everyone was trying to get out of the campsite as quickly as possible as they couldn't leave as long as they were inside the wards. Harry subtly pointed his hand at one of the empty tents and cast the strongest exploding curse he knew when nobody was looking at him. The tent erupted in a sea of flames and everyone near that particular tent fell on the ground, and their own group wasn't an exception. Screams rang out and the people started to run around frantically. Using this chance, Harry easily slipped away from the rest. Harry slowly started to move away from Sirius and the others and a smile bloomed on his face as he felt the hostile gazes still fixed on his back. "Harry! Harry!" He heard Sirius screams from the back. He felt a bit bad for leaving them like this, but he quickly squashed the feeling. There was no reason to feel bad for leaving them behind. They wouldn't have allowed him to fight and he needed to take care of this on his own. At least, they decided to attack before the Weasleys could arrive. Maybe I should go a bit easy on them, Harry wondered inside his mind in amusement, and Lily was about to protest, but before she could say anything, he started to speak again. I don't think so. I am going to *k them up, Harry decided, and Lily proudly nodded her head. Yes, the forest will be a nice place to ambush them. Harry nodded his head in satisfaction and started to make his way toward the forest as fighting his attackers right here wasn't ideal. With that thought in his mind, he quickly slipped through the tree line. A group of dozen wizards and witches arrived in front of the tree line a couple of minutes after Harry entered the forest. "What about the rest of the group?" Johann Musso asked as he jerked his head toward the crowd. Hans Muller, the leader of the group, turned back to stare at Johann. "Leave them be. Harry Potter is our sole target. We were only told to kill them in case the boy wasn't alone, and now that the boy is alone, we aren't going to bother with them," Hans explained with a hard look on his face. Boss? Can we, capture him?" Lisa Gertch asked with a lecherous grin on her face. "Now, we kill him. That was the contract." Hans refused her without missing a beat. Man. I always wanted to *k a celebrity and he is so young, just the way I like them," Lisa whined in disappointment. "Get your head out of the gutter, you sick pedo." Jenna Winston growled, making Lisa growl back. She might be a pedo, but she was a cultured pedo. "At least, I don't *k werewolves." Lisa snarled back. "The two of you, get your head in the game. We off him and get the hell out of here so that we can collect our gold." Hans snapped at the duo before spells could fly true. He internally groaned. Sometimes, he wondered why he still hired the two of them, and then he remembered that the two of them were really good at the job. Fine, the two of them huffed petulantly as they crossed their hands in front of their chest. "All right." Hans nodded his head. "All right. We will part in groups of 3 as we don't know where he is. The one who kills him gets a 100 galleon bonus," Hans ordered, making some of the members cheer in appreciation before breaking his team into 4 groups, and after that, they finally entered the forest, and all 4 groups decided to head in different directions, but none of them thought of casting the human revealing charm. If they had, then they would have noticed a disillusioned figure floating right over them. "I don't know what you are going to do to the others, but I want you to flay that bitch alive before setting her up on fire," Lily ground out while gritting her teeth. If she had a body, then she would have gouged that bitch's eyes with a spoon for looking at her Hadrian with lust in her eyes. "Don't worry, Mom. I will give her a painful death, but I don't have the time to flay her alive," Harry promised. He was also unhappy with what the woman said, but he wasn't going to lose his cool over something like that. He didn't learn occlumency so that he could go and lose his head at the smallest provocations. "Now, let's see," Harry mused as he started to wonder which group to take out first. He knew who their leader was, so he decided to save that group for the last. "Eeny, meeny, miny, mo," Harry started to sing inside his mind while rubbing his chin. Kill that bitch and her group and get this over with, Lily groaned while shaking her head. True, her Hadrian was growing up into a fine man, but sometimes, he could still be such a kid. Fine. If you say so. Harry nodded his head in understanding and started to fly toward where the woman and her group trailed off. They haven't gone that far, so he already started to hear their voices. Hey, since you won't be getting to Foo *K Harry Potter, what about me? One of the men asked lecherously. Buy me a nice dinner and then we can Foo *K, the woman sighed tiredly. After the mission she was going to be quite pent up, so she wasn't going to say no to a nice Foo *K. Hey! What about me? The last member of their group asked, sounding outraged. You can buy me a nice dinner tomorrow and then we can Foo *K, the woman answered dismissively. Unfortunately, for them, none of them were going to survive the night. Harry floated down right behind the trio and cast a silencing charm with his hands as he didn't want to alert the other groups. He pulled out his combat knife and stabbed one of the men in his throat and at the same time, cast a cutting curse at the other man's neck with his other hand. Thud thud! The head dropped on the ground, followed by the body, and the man he stabbed grabbed his throat, trying to stop the blood flowing out of his body with a look of horror and despair marred on his face. He was already choking on his own blood and he could feel the life slipping out of his body. Obviously, he was terrified. The woman obviously heard the noises and turned around with her wand in her hand, but before she could turn completely around, she found herself falling on the ground. Lisa blinked in confusion. She had no idea why she fell and she was about to try to stand up, but that is when the pain hit her. She felt like someone had set her legs on fire. Crag! She screamed at the top of her lungs and slowly twisted her body to see what happened to her legs, and much to her horror she found that everything beneath both of her knees was missing. Gra! She screamed even more and turned her body to find the one responsible for cutting her legs and found a boy standing right over her, and it just wasn't any boy, it was Harry Potter, the boy they came to kill, the boy she wanted to Foo *K. His eyes were glowing eerily, she felt like she was staring into the pits of hell. Lisa had no idea how the boy was able to get the drop on them, but that wasn't important anymore. The matter was, he got a drop on them and now she was lying on the floor, but Lisa wasn't a greenhorn. She might have lost her legs, but she still had her hands. She was going to Foo *King murder him. She snarled and tried to raise her wand at him, only to find her wand arm lying on the ground. For the first time, she went into shock. She had another wand holstered in her belt, but she didn't even try to reach out to grab her secondary wand with her last arm. She simply stared at the stump of her wand arm and then she finally started to scream. She had never felt so much pain in her life and she finally started to go into shock due to losing all that blood. It is quite impressive. Harry was impressed by the amount of blood someone has inside their body. Past tense, of course, Harry added in amusement as he continued to stare at the incomplete human at his feet. Then he turned toward the man he had stabbed. The man was already lying dead on the ground. He turned back toward the woman and pointed his wand at her. This is going to be more painful than what you are feeling, so it's all right to keep screaming, Harry said indifferently and cast organ liquefying curse at her. Chapter 100, Fatal Mistake They Made, 2. Harry didn't bother to wait and watch the woman die as he had other matters to deal with and people to kill. He was confident that he could deal with them even if they were together, but it was much easier to deal with them like this, so he wanted to wrap them up before they could realize that they were being picked up one by one. Then there was also the fact that he wanted to deal with the Death Eaters, so as quickly as he could deal with the mercenaries, the better for him. He floated through the forest silently. He could still hear the screams from the campsite, but he decided to pay them no mind as he was already on top of the second group. Once again he cast silencing charms around the group as he slowly descended behind them from the sky. Where the Foo *K did the run off to? The biggest man in the group snarled in anger. I am going to break his legs and heal them so that I could break them again. The same man continued to rage as he punched a tree. The problem with your plan is you don't know shit about healing, another man pointed out with a chuckle, making the bigger man growl at his words. Will you two shut up? If the boy hears you then he might run deeper into the forest, the third whispered furiously. The biggest man smiled fearfully at that. Good. He will be killed by animals. A fitting death for a runt like him. What do you think, Joseph? The man asked the second man, but he received no answer. He was about to turn around to take a look, but then all of a sudden, he stumbled forward and dropped to his knees. He slowly looked down only to find a massive metal spike jutting out of his chest. He spat out some blood from his face and gurgled something unintelligible, trying to call out to their third member, but the last thing he saw was the last member of their group being pinned to a tree by a metal spike. He didn't even get to see the face of the person who killed them. That was quite brutal and efficient, Lily pointed out after Harry pinned the last member of the group to a tree. Though, are you all right? Lily asked with a hint of concern in her voice. Killing the Dursleys was one thing. They had abused him for almost 6 years, so it was understandable that he felt righteous anger against them, so she wanted to know if her Hadrian was all right. Not to get it wrong, she didn't want him to stop killing. In fact, she was feeling extremely giddy, excited, and proud at Harry's actions, but she wanted to know if he was really all right. After all, everything was only secondary while her Hadrian was always her priority and his mental health was also important. I am completely fine. If you are worried about me for killing them so nonchalantly, then don't. They came here to kill me, so I have no qualms over killing them, Harry explained as he could already guess what his mom was thinking about. Did you forget that I took my first life when I was only 11? Harry reminded her with a shrug. Well, if you are fine with it, then who am I to complain? Lily asked rhetorically with a massive grin marring her face. She felt like all of her hard work was finally panning out. This is what she wanted her Hadrian to grow up into. They lost the war because Dumbledore's morals were choking them at every step. Only if they had killed the Death Eaters, then it would have at least dissuaded a lot of people from joining Voldemort. Moving on, Harry mused internally as he started to float upward in the air. The rest of the mercenaries weren't going to kill themselves. It only took him a couple of minutes to find the third group and he decided to use the tactic he used to take down the last group. He cast silencing charms around the group while descending toward the ground, but much to his surprise one of the women in the group twisted her body and cast 2 exploding hexes at him. The curses were beyond lethal, so Harry created a green astral fan in his hand and batted away the spells with extreme ease. He knew that the disillusionment charm wasn't impeccable, but he still wasn't expecting anyone to sense him, especially when he had masked his scent and silenced his robes, in case any of the mercenaries were werewolves. Harry finally got a good look at the woman and she looked like the female version of Alastor Moody. The woman was missing her left eye, but instead of having a fake magical eye, her eye socket was covered by an eye patch, and instead of missing a leg, the woman was missing her right arm. Her face was riddled with various scars and the left side of her face seemed to be deliberately burned off, but that wasn't the end of it, she also seemed to be missing her whole left ear. While Harry was busy inspecting the woman, she was relentlessly attacking him even though none of her spells were hitting her desired target. He may not be paying attention to her, but he could easily brush her off as she lacked training. Harry had to admit, she was quite fast, but unfortunately for her, that was it. The other 2 of her group finally started to react and turn around, but instead of attacking him, the other woman raised her wand in the air and released a flare while the only man in the group started to attack him along with the female version of Alastor Moody. Harry snorted and dropped the disillusionment charm. There was no use in hiding anymore, as they clearly knew where he was. It's him. Kill him. The woman who released the flare screamed, but even with the 3 of them casting at the same time, Harry didn't look bothered in the slightest. The 3 of them were good, Harry admitted, but they were nowhere close to the level of Jacqueline or Nymphadora when it came to pure speed and skill. The only advantage they had was the lethality of their spells. Every single spell they were casting was lethal as Fu***k, and if any of them hit their mark, then Harry was dead meat. Avada Kedavra! The man snarled and cast the killing curse at Harry. Once again, Harry simply batted away the green death spell with the green astral fan in his hand, shocking his 3 assailants, or were they defenders since it was him who attacked them? Food for thought, he guessed. He was sure that someone had probably noticed the flare and right now, they were probably on their way here, so he needed to wrap this up as quickly as possible. He wasn't scared about the rest of the mercenaries arriving here as he could easily take care of them, but he wanted to wrap everything up in case someone else, most likely Aurors, arrived here. Impossible, the woman who had launched the flare, mumbled in clear disbelief. So, the legends are true, he can stop a killing curse, the woman concluded with a gasp, making Harry raise his eyes at her in amusement. Have it back then, just like Voldemort did, Harry said as he pointed his wand at the man and cast the green death spell. Avada Kedavra! The green beam came out from the tip of his secondary wand as his primary wand was still in the clutches of Violetta. The beam struck the man straight on his chest as he was too terrified to dodge the spell, and the next second, he fell on the ground, completely lifeless. The disfigured woman didn't even flinch at the sight of her companion dying, but she simply waved her fake right hand in the air, releasing a purple mist before bolting in the other direction. Harry felt his danger sense kick in and he immediately created a green astral spherical shield around him. All mystic arts spells he had learned till now were yellow, but he wasn't one of their members, so he decided to make some changes to the spells to distinguish himself from them. Changing the color of the spells was the most obvious and easiest way to go, so that is exactly what he decided to do, and green was the most obvious and appealing color to him. It was still a work in progress as he was yet to finish modifying all the spells, but he was getting there. Harry stared at the other woman who was left behind in fascination as she started to choke and bleed from her nose, ears, mouth, and eyes. The mist was some sort of deadly poison, and if he was any other normal wizard, then he would have been bleeding and choking alongside that woman. Harry did have poison immunity, but he wasn't to test his immunity against this poison. Something told him that he would have survived, but why test it? Harry inclined his head and decided to catch the female version of Alastor Moody. He was quite intrigued by her, so he decided to capture her instead of killing her. He raised his hand and started to rotate it in the air, creating a portal right inside the spherical shield. He stepped through the circle and found himself high in the air, but instead of pummeling down toward the ground, he started to float. He looked around, but couldn't find the woman anywhere. He raised his wand in the air and started to cast Human Revealing Charm. Just as he expected, the last group of mercenaries was moving toward the flare and he got a few other pings from the spell, but none of them were running away from the spot where he was until now. On his 6th attempt, he finally got a ping from a person running in the opposite direction, and the said person was heading deeper into the forest. A beaming smile appeared on his face. Bingo! Harry cheerfully exclaimed inside his mind before blasting off in that direction.